There's nothing that I could say about Deus Ex that would save me from upsetting someone. It's such an iconic and beloved title that whatever I land on will be wrong and someone will make sure to let me know what and why. Despite that though, I can't ignore it and it has to be covered in a video like this one. So, Deus Ex is a first-person perspective cyberpunk themed role-playing game set in dystopian version of year 2052. Now, 2050s are not a great time. The deadly virus known as Grey Death is taking grim harvest, killing millions, and not once but in an ongoing manner and all around the world. It's terrible, I know, but such is life. There is a cure, it has to be said loud and clear here, and it's called Ambrosia. Ironic name if you ask me, but also very fitting as its supply is limited. VersaLife Corporation can only produce it in very small batches, so the government, particularly the United States, carefully monitors and controls its distribution, making sure that it gets in the right hands only. And I'm sure that you can guess what these quote-unquote right hands are. The scarcity of the cure and priority that the rich and powerful get when it comes to access to it leads to global unrest and increase in drug sales and terrorist activities and attacks. So, to combat the problem, an elite unit known as UNATCO, as in UNATCO, is formed. Its job is to maintain peace and dissolve any and all criminal cells that may be endangering it. You play as JC Denton, and if you wonder what it stands for, it's not Jesus Christ, it's Jesus Christopher, no relation to earlier at all. Also, totally not true. And you're a nanotechnology enhanced agent on first day at UNATCO, and as awkward as first days can often be, yours isn't. It doesn't mean that it's not action-packed, cause unlawful organization known as NSF, so National Secessionist Forces, raid supply of Ambrosia at UNATCO headquarters. So, from the get-go, you've a lot of work cut out for you. Deus Ex is a very unique title, cause while on the first glance it looks like your everyday shooter, it's so much more than that. It mixes shootouts, adventuring, stealth and puzzling so well that today, more than 2 decades later, it's still universally beloved classic and considered to be one of the most important games in the entire history of gaming. In no small part thanks to how its missions that you will be sent on are structured. It's meant to be as immersive simulation as it was possible in 2000, and I'd risk saying that the devs nailed it. While said missions can have different objectives and you'll see a lot of action both in terms of governmental conspiracies and interacting with different groups like Triads, Majestic 12 and Illuminati, most of them can be completed in numerous ways. And the freedom of choice of how to approach them, how to lead JC to complete them, is what most of us fell in love with. So, among many others, you can fulfill the objectives by many of the missions by working in stealth and avoiding combat as much as possible. By sniping enemies from a very comfortable safety of large distance, you can run in guns blazing, going through the spermax faster than they do in action movies, or, and that's a pretty fun way of doing things, you can talk it out. Because yeah, not everything has to come down to violence. Some of them can be completed by engineering and hacking too, so you know, the Ambrosia's your oyster or whatever. Oh, fun fact, even 2 of the major bosses, if you only know about them, can be killed off much earlier so that you won't have to face them later on. And that choice too, same as all others in the game, brings consequences that will follow you throughout your entire adventure and influence everything. The state of the world the game is set in, and dialogues. That freedom of choice that we've not had a chance to experience before Deus Ex leads to it having a lot of redundancies baked in. So, it's impossible to experience everything that it has to offer content-wise on a single playthrough. In fact, you'd probably have to complete it a good 5-6 times, each time playing in a different way, to get close to that elusive 100%. Still, if you can overlook its ancient by today's standard presentation, and are someone who loves immersive games with a lot of freedom and a very robust and deep plot full of twists, turns and betrayals, it's probably not only objectively the best game in this video, but also of the entire year. Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed is another entry in the seemingly endlessly running series, and one that polarized fans, splitting them into 2 totally opposing camps. Those that loved and enjoyed it for what it was, and those that were pissed that it was not what they were hoping for, and that it entirely changed its gameplay formula. So, unlike its older brothers and sisters, I think I can call them that, cause you know, why the hell not? It was a game that laser focused on one manufacturer only, Porsche, or Porsche. I really don't know what's the correct pronunciation of it in English. And not only you can only pick their cars, but also only race against them. It may seem limiting, and I agree, to some degree it feels like it, but in reality it features over 80 different models of the car. From the very first 356 Ferdinand to the latest at the time model, 2000's 911 Turbo. There are tons of different tracks in the game to zoom around on, and they're all beautiful. They come in 3 varieties too, and can be circuits, sprints going from point A to point B, and those that have few alternate routes, which are not only more fun than the regular ones, but also allow for strategic choice of paths, depending on where you are in a pack of opponents. When the game released, I was enchanted by its presentation, and it was better than anything else I've seen to date, at least in a racer. Coupled with incredibly realistic and true-to-life physics and driving model meant that the game not only looked great, but also felt amazing, with each model of the Porsche controlling in a unique way. Which also meant that each time I got an upgrade, I had to relearn how to drive. Well, race, not drive really, but you know what I mean. Potato, potato, petrol, oil, gasoline. Porsche Unleashed comes with 2 single-player game modes: Factory Driver, in which you complete increasingly more demanding events in different cars, like slaloms, stunts, deliveries with police interfering them as much as they can, or races with pre-selected cars. And Evolution, which is the main mode and for all intents and purposes is a career that you start with just enough money to get a basic Porsche 356. As you complete the races and years pass by, however, you upgrade your car and eventually change it for newer and better models as they are released. Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed is a fine game, fine at what it is, but while I loved it and had a lot of fun with it too, I was one of the 4 mentioned gamers that were tad disappointed. I wanted cars from different manufacturers and arcade racing, and while Porsche Unleashed was not full-fledged simulation, it leaned towards it more than towards arcade on a video game racer spectrum. It is still worth a playthrough, so if you're into the genre, don't skip it. Now, how many Tomb Raider games are there? My guess is 57. And I don't think that I'm off by more than 1 or 2 titles. And Chronicles was the one that dropped in the year 2000. Same as most other ones, with some notable exceptions, it too is a third-person action-adventure, boobalicious lady version of Indiana Jones fare, and it's as fun as most of them are. Now, before I get any further, let me make one thing clear. It's largely irrelevant, but in the spirit of oversharing, you know, a staple of this channel, I shall tell you what I subjectively think about it. I only really care about the latest 3 today, to be honest. Well, and maybe the first 2 for sentimental reasons too, so all the ones in between, I can live without. Back then, I was devouring them as they were coming out, and objectively, most are rather good. Varying degrees of good, but good. So, anyway. You're once again Lara Croft, a beautiful big-chested, long-legged, incredible accent sporting heroine / archaeologist / adventurer / special forces demon hunter. Yep, there's been quite a few of games, and some touch the occult too. And Chronicles is a very special title among all others, as it's not a singular adventure from point A to point B as we're used to, but series of flashbacks to Lara's past in different points in her life. So, you'll visit few different locations throughout the world, experiencing bits and pieces from Lara's earlier, previously not gamified shenanigans. So you'll visit Rome, coast of Russia, island near Ireland, and a corporate building in New York. But what's the story tying these self-contained and entirely different scenes together, you may wonder? Well, following the events of the previous game, The Last Revelation, Lara is presumed dead, buried under the collapsed Great Pyramid of Giza. So, at her home of Croft Manor, 3 of her friends and associates, Lara's butler Winston, family priest Father Patrick Dunstan, and Lara's history teacher Charles Kane, gather to reminisce over her former exploits following the memorial service. That's how fast and easy these seemingly random Lara-led action-packed levels were tied together. It's not a bad choice if you ask me, though this lack of coherence between the particular parts of the game makes the entire experience feel a bit lacking. Not bad, just, you know, not what I was hoping for. Each of the scenes is like a minimized version of an entire Lara's adventure, and despite being disconnected from one another, they're rather decent. What's a bit disappointing though is that the game added nothing to Lara's movesets or gameplay mechanics, reusing what was a standard in the last few. It's clear that Tomb Raider Chronicles was not the best game in the series, and perhaps one that the devs did not care to make, given the presumed killing off of our heroine in a previous one. But while it's not the best, not in the top 3 even, it's still a solid title worth playing through at least once. If not for anything else, then to learn if she really died at least. A noteworthy thing about Windows' release is that it came with a level editor, which while not known to have spawned a lot of user-created content, is something very gamer-friendly and worth mentioning. If you loved previous and later Lara games, this one's a no-brainer, but if you didn't, perhaps start somewhere else, if possible that is. Following their previous game, industry giant, Joe Wood, Austrian developer, released their latest in 2000, Traffic Giant. And it's as fun and deep simulation as the earlier one was. As the title suggests, it's all about traffic, or more accurately, getting to grips with it and controlling it so it does not get out of hand. The idea here is simple. You're running a transportation company and have to create an efficient and profitable transportation network within the city, all the while driving up the competition and making sure that the city is not clogged. That's in the sandbox mode though, and you can also play sorta campaign with series of missions to complete one after another. Missions like for instance earning a particular revenue within a preset time period. To keep the city going and running like a well-oiled machine, you've access to different modes of transportation, so buses, streetcars, trams, suspended monorail, and even maglev trains. The towns are bustling and can hold even up to 40,000 individual citizens and simulate them all, which is quite a lot for year 2000. That said, to run appropriately fast, some things had to be simplified, naturally by using a particular set of behaviors and actions for different members of society. So, men only work and do nothing else. So, it's a priority to make sure that they have fast and easy access to and back from work. Women don't work, which in 2000 was a bit of feeling, but whatever, it is what it is, the simulation had to be kept simple after all, so they need good access to all the shopping centers and stores. And kids, well, they naturally go to school. Additionally, all of them, from time to time, like to get a little R&R and will require access to different recreational objects and locations. It sounds like a lot, but it's not that complex, trust me. And as soon as you click on your first building, you'll get a detailed rundown listing of everything that there is to know about it. Who works where they shop, and what is their favorite entertainment spot. Now, naturally, if you'd be clicking on every single building and trying to fulfill everyone's particular request, you'd end up with a jumbled mess of a city or run out of money fast. So, the key to success is efficiency and smart planning. The sooner you figure it out, the better you'll do and more fun you'll have playing. Some of you may say that Transport Tycoon Deluxe is a better game, and that Traffic Giant is nowhere near as good. Well, I've two things to say to you. For one, you're right, it's not as good and it's not as fun, but it's neither bad nor unplayable. And for two, they can't really be compared apples to apples, as one is an apple and another is a burger. Not as healthy, but most definitely enjoyed by a much wider chunk of the population. And if I'm not being clear here, it's Transport Tycoon Deluxe that's the burger. Might and Magic 7 Day of the Destroyer is an 8th installment in the long-running series of RPG games and first to receive a rather negative response from gamers and critics upon its release. Main reason being its length, ancient engine used to power it all, which looked generation behind the competition, and changes to the party forming. And while I do not disregard these complaints as invalid, I feel that they may have been a bit too harsh and that it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it was made out to be. Well sure, perhaps not being able to create a whole party was a big change and you've only made one character and recruited others along the way, but that was something that the other games did for a while, and it's not a bad way of doing things at all, just a lot different. Limiting classes available to humans to knights, clerics and necromancers was a bit more drastic change, but also not something worth abandoning the game for. Especially that instead of additional class choices, you could incorporate different species in your party composition that work kinda like different classes would, only looked less appealing. So minotaurs, dragons, vampires, dark elves and trolls were added. And even if not what the gamers were looking for, they were a fun and fresh take on the formula. Were these balanced well though? No, and dragons in particular were the ones sticking out the most. So, I can kinda understand it as being a valid complaint. Same goes for the engine. It wasn't great when it was used first in Might and Magic 6, and by the time 8 dropped, it looked and worked clunkily compared to the competition. I did like having a choice of real-time or turn-based combat though, but that wasn't anything new to this particular entry. So, overall I agree that the Day of the Destroyer may have been a bit disappointing, but it wasn't bad. Typical for its series, it allows you to approach most quests in a non-linear manner, and other than the storyline ones, these can be completed in any order and whenever it suits you. Dungeons and puzzles are still present in the game and as fun as they've always been. Same as in 7th entry, at some point in the story you'll need to pick a side in a particular conflict, and that choice and its consequences will persevere with you throughout the entire adventure. This time, however, the choice will not influence the game ending in any way. Might and Magic 8 naturally is set in fictional and series staple world of Enroth on the continent of Jadame and acts as a sequel to Might and Magic 7 and Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Armageddon's Blade. More than 1,000 years ago, the interstellar war between the Ancients and the Kregan waged, and was more brutal, more bloody, and ended up with more dead than anything before, even more than the close encounters with my boss's wife that are known to drive people to self-harm. She once emptied an entire shopping center with a single comment, and it is, and will forever be known as Black Tuesday. Anyway, millennia passed and both Ancients and Kregan are nothing more than folk tales, stuff of legends really, and something hardly anyone believes ever existing anymore. That is until events of Might and Magic 6, when Kregan came back, invading the world. And while that game concluded with killing of the Cregan Queen and a cleanse that erased each and every last of them from history, the ancients, fearing Cregan return, decided to enact a scorched earth plan. So they sent Eschaton, a planeswalker, to plant a giant crystal in the village of Ravenshore on the continent of Jadam. The act caused an elemental storm that tore across the continent, breaching boundaries to 4 elemental planes, releasing monsters upon Enroth. Monsters capable of destroying it. You, playing as a caravan guard Mr. Nobody, have to assemble a party capable enough to save the world and prevent the catastrophe. MDK 2 is a follow-up to earlier and its time groundbreaking MDK and as much of a self-parody as the original was. It's also a first-person action-adventure shooter in vein of Tomb Raider. MDK 2 starts moments after the first game ended. Convinced that the alien scourge has been eliminated, Kurt Hectic, our janitor turned superhero, returns home to meet with his drinking buddy, don't fact check that, Dr. Hawkins, just to learn when he arrives that one of the alien minecrawlers was not destroyed. So he heads off to do just that, finish the job that is, you know, how his janitor martial arts training taught him to do, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, or was it Karate Kid? Whatever, point is, no floor shall remain unmopped and no trash bag unthrown. And yes, I am aware that these are not real words. But if we all try, like really try, and keep using them in our daily life, then perhaps they will stick and spread. So, what do you say? Should we try to create new words together? And if your answer is yes, then I would also like to suggest adding unbacon to it as a word describing different kinds of food that just happen not to be bacon. Anyway, where were we? So Kurt gets to that last pesky minecrawler, and as soon as he deals with it, a massive in size and ego, alien Schwashwink appears and reveals that the invasion of Earth is anything but over. So, Kurt, along with Dr. Hawkins and Max, a 6-legged robot dog capable of spreading death and destruction in oh so many directions at once, head off to deal with the situation, as fate of Earth, nay, the entire galaxy, is in their hands once more. Or pose, cause, you know, one of them is a dog. All tools and weapons that Kurt had at his disposal are back, and Doc and Max have their own set of special skills, because of course they're playable in the sequel. So, Kurt for all intents and purposes is a special forces sniper, Max is a heavy gunner causing more damage than the other two and wielding 4 weapons at once, and Doc Hawkins is the weakest of the bunch, but most of his levels are puzzle-centric and his skills are geared for them. So he can combine and create new items and has 2 separate inventories for each of his hands. In fact, other than the first level, all of them have their own exclusive stages to battle through. That split made MDK2 a bit more puzzle and platforming oriented and less focused on pure pew-pew-pew-pewing. I mean, let's be clear here, there's still a lot of shooting and sniping, and with a running comedy commentary no less, it's just the proportions between it and puzzles shifted a bit. While MDK2 retained humor and action-packed gameplay of the original, adding a lot of variety to it by offering 3 unique protagonists to play as and more complex level design, the wow factor was gone. By 2003 the games were not new anymore, they were the norm, and not something to be surprised by. As a matter of fact, they were something we were kinda expecting from each new release. So while MDK2 was fantastic, even if a bit too demanding for my liking, it didn't steal the hearts of gamers same way the first one did. Carmageddon III TDR 2000 is a vehicular combat video game, a follow-up to a more well-known Carmageddon II Carpocalypse now, and arguably the weakest out of all 3 games. And not only because its subtitle is not as catchy, though that's a factor too. Don't fact check that, trust me. Previous 2 did so-so on the consoles, gathering mainly average scores, and fantastic on PC, finding a rather large and favorable to them player base. What was the reason for third not achieving the same level of fun factor and popularity, you may wonder? I did too, and it's hard to tell, but if I would have to wager a guess, I'd bet on the change of the developer being responsible for it. And I don't think I'm too far off in that assumption either, as its sequel, that funny enough released over a decade later, was made by the same folks who made the first 2, and it did bit better. That is a story for a completely different video though. Anyway, despite what it may sound like from this chaotic intro, Carmageddon 3 is not a bad game. Sure, it's not as iconic as the earlier 2 were, but it's still pretty fun if you enjoy these types of experiences. And I do. Perhaps not for hours on end, but an hour or 2 from time to time to release steam and relax after a terrible day in hell, it's actually great. And I do have a lot of these terrible days lately. Difference between TDR 2000 and earlier Carmageddons is that its predecessors, while theoretically claiming to be racers, in reality were all about distraction, cause as long as you kept mowing at their cars and showing pedestrians that their place is not on the streets but in large puddles of red goo, you could carry on playing as the time would never run out. The whole racing was just an excuse to mindless and stupid fun. And here, you actually do have to race. Neither damaging other races nor driving over pedestrians actually gives you enough time to sustain yourself in the level long enough to win it. So, while causing as much destruction as you can along your way, you still actually have to try to get to the finish line. Which, for fans of races is fine, though I don't really imagine many of them going for a game like Carmageddon in the first place. For me personally, it was a bit annoying. Not annoying enough to discourage me from playing, but plenty enough to prefer the other entries over it. It's a personal opinion though, so don't judge the game solely based on it, because if you're someone who's capable of having fun driving imaginative and armed to the teeth armored cars, destroying everything on your path and leaving long blood slides behind, then you'll have a lot of fun with this one. Especially that its quote-unquote career mode is built around 9 different environments with 5 tracks each for a total of 45, split between regular races and so-called missions, so escape between the environment's special kinds of races. And all that can be experienced in 50 different cars and with use of tons of over-the-top power-ups, making this whole fair even crazier. Whether it sounds like something for you or not, TDR 2000 is at least worth a try. Messiah is a sci-fi futuristic humorous cyberpunk third-person action-adventure title with a slight occult background. Wow, what a mouthful. I could just say game. Messiah is a game. Just look how nicely it rolls. Anyway, the world in the future is a rather terrible, nay awful place, crime and corruption spreads and the planet is ruled by a single, and evil to the core I must add, spiritual leader, commonly known as Father Prime. Yes, like these numbers and Optimus. And he's just the worst kind of a dick. Not only holding a firm grip on the entire planet, but also scheming to summon Satan to our reality. And not to cause death and destruction that he can actually do whatever he wants to. He's doing it so that he could learn how to control him and then discard him like a dirty rag and use that knowledge and skill to control God. Naturally for his own needs and devices. That is who we left in charge. God, however, being the imaginary all-seeing creature that he is, naturally catches the wind of the nefarious plan and plans to intervene. But since he just finished baking that, dare I say it, godlike pizza, he's not gonna just leave it to cool off, he wants to eat it fresh and hot. So he sends one of his little helpers, Bob, a puto. Now, I'm not religious, so I don't really know what a puto is, I've only been to church 5 times throughout my entire life, and it was twice on some kind of international trips with sightseeing and 3 times for funerals. So yeah, my experience is limited here. But looking at who we play as, I'd call it a kid with wings. So not a birdman, but more a bird boy. That said, apparently, at least within the game's world, he is a 1,000 years old creature with a soul of a human that, unlike most other of God's servants, so angels, means that he has his own will and can, but won't, but still can, but shouldn't, yet he has an option to, but he won't use it, but he's capable of opposing God, even if given direct order. That may or may not resurface on your adventure, but for now, that's all you need to know. You're a kid with wings and free will, probably buzzing with hormones and on a mission from God to stop Father Prime. Anyway, in your cherub form you're rather prone to damage and getting killed, but you can literally possess any other creature you fly into and take full control. So animals, humans, aliens or cyborgs, all are fair game, as long as they're biological. And since Father Prime kinda sorta knows that you're after him, he sent entire worlds, police and military force after you. So getting to him will be a, well, blast. Yep, it will actually be quite fun. Especially that the levels are rather big and open, often quite vertical too, and that you'll get to use entirely different skills, weapons and abilities of creatures that you're in. And while some will quite obviously be used for combat, like Brute's strength in melee or Policeman's gun for shooting, others may be used for puzzling, especially if you encounter certain areas where only particular folks can be allowed in. Messiah is not your everyday shooter. It's a well thought out design-wise game that can easily offer hours of fun, and its fun story, yes, it's fun at times, an enjoyable gameplay loop will easily carry you through from the first minute to the end sequence. Try it out. Soldier of Fortune is a first-person shooter that my friends at the time went bananas over. I kinda get that, as I enjoyed it for a little while too, but definitely not to the same degree that they did. Its most famous or infamous, depending where you are in the world, feature was a very new and fresh concept of precise division of a human body into 26 individual zones. Zones that could be individually harmed, that displayed wounds in a unique and for the time appropriate way, and sometimes, if you were lucky or crazy enough, you could even dismember some of the enemies. Fun. Not gonna lie, that's what drew me to the game too. I was a kid, and fun ways of virtual killings were, well, fun. And don't worry, regardless of how many arms or legs I tore playing Soldier of Fortune, I still grew up to be just a little concerning citizen. And not because I'm dangerous, but because there's definitely something not alright under the roof. It's my roof though, and I will deal with it when it starts leaking. Anyway, number of ways you can kill, dismember or explode body parts of the enemies in this one is rather large. especially that there's a lot of high caliber weapons in the game, and if you're looking to let some steam off, I'd risk saying that it may be better outlet than the Carmageddons were. Still, tons of weapons, fast and frantic action, and an interesting, even if a bit odd story made it a must play, and I believe that it remains one to this very day. Story-wise, Sergei Decker, a terrorist hailing from South Africa, steals nuclear weapons from Russia and aims on selling them to whomever pays more, regardless of the consequences. Enter you, John Mullins, a proud business in the front and party in the back hairdo wearer, janitor by day, cross-dresser by night, and super agent by mistake. Well, truth be told, not sure any of that is correct, other than the name and that you play as him. But you know, never hurts to use your imagination. And you'll take John on hell of an adventure in New York, Sudan, Siberia, Tokyo, Kosovo, Iraq, Uganda, and finally Germany, and you'll have a lot of fun doing so. I promise. Icewind Dale is a role-playing genre classic and a younger sister to its older sibling of Baldur's Gate. It was made using the same engine, and it also uses 2nd edition AD&D rule set, as faithfully translated to a video game format as it was possible in the year 2000. Combat naturally is also real-time with an active pause, meaning that whenever you want to grab a spoonful of soup mid-combat, call your boo or take a quick pee, you can just hit space like you'd hit a pizza dough for a pizza and go ahead and do just that. Not sure if anyone's still saying boo, and naturally, I meant going to toilet for that pee, don't do that in your room, man. But I'm sure most of you got what I was on about, even without this unnecessary disclaimer. When the game's paused, you can issue orders to all of your party members, and they will happily carry them out when unpaused, if they don't die from that huge fireball hurling their way first. Cause there's always somehow one going your way. Hard to explain why, maybe you rolled one on luck. Anyway, while Icewind Dale is a fantastic adventure, it was known for being a game out of the two that focused much more on combat and encounter strategy rather than pure role-playing elements. What does it mean for a potential first-time player? In short, jack shit, cause it's great, and the longer version would be a bit more combat and a bit less talking, nothing more, nothing less, so yeah, if you liked one, you like the other, and the difference in the flow may actually be pleasant surprise as it will feel fresh, whichever the way with the two games you're going, from BG to ID or vice versa. Now Planescape Torment, also made on the same engine, that's an entirely different kind of an RPG. Not a subject for today, so let's get back to Icewind Dale. You start by creating a party of up to 6 adventurers, picking their name, gender, race, class and alignment, and then weapon proficiencies and abilities. And straight after, jump right into the tavern in small town of East Haven, where Hroktar, town's leader, recruits them on an expedition to investigate the town of Kuladar after hearing reports of strange happenings there. And since the ale, wine, roasted boars and pleasures of the body and mind cost money you're keen to accept, as cash is not something you've a lot of left. I mean, sure, last few nights were definitely to remember, but earning the money back will surely take a while. Anyway, on the road to Kuladar, the caravan is ambushed by frost giants who cause an avalanche, killing everyone but your party members. It's as if the avalanche was deliberately trying not to hit your party. Odd, but Lady Luck seems to be on your side for some reason. So, what's left there for you to do than to carry on with the quest and get to the heart of the mystery that caused it all? Nothing, so you do just that. And that's how Icewind Dale starts off. The smell of death surrounds me. No, wait, that's not it. Not again. Diablo II is an action role-playing hack and slash and one of the most difficult games in today's video to talk about, for a variety of reasons. One of them, it being one of the most important games, and not in the year only, but in the entire history of gaming. Second, the controversy that carried on from the first title, with some people insisting on not calling it an RPG, as there was too much frantic action in it and too little strategy. I mean, I wonder what they would say about it today, when most games that come out are of so many mixed genres that, other than the simulations and sports games, most other are mix of at least 3-4 basic ones. And finally third, it's difficult to talk about Diablo II because of the expectations most of us had for it after the first. And while people were split into two camps, those that were right and those that were wrong, I'm sure that everyone would agree that it was an incredibly important release. You, my dear viewer, regardless of your choice of sides, was naturally in the right, and it's the others that are wrong. Because you know, you're you, and you're nearly always right. Diablo II is set shortly after the first one and continues on the story of the demonic overlord. Noble hero of Tristram from the first game, after battling it out with Diablo, realized that Lord of Terror could never be really defeated, so he made the biggest sacrifice imaginable. Also a stupid one, but that's beside the point. He absorbed the spirit of Diablo into himself, hoping that he would be able to contain the demon within, at least for as long as he lived. Well, as strong of a warrior as he was no scholar, and his lack of a very basic demonic knowledge that most of us take for granted, having been educated from young age, caused him to lose himself and be corrupted by the overwhelming evil, losing his human nature and transforming into the Dark Wanderer, which coincidentally is also who my boss's wife was dressed as last Halloween, as she wanted to take form of something nice, cuddly and not as dangerous as she is. And Diablo, especially in his Dark Wanderer form, was something she found to be laughingly cute. So yeah, I have first-hand experience with the dark and demonic. Anyway, coming back to our game, the Dark Wanderer did just that, wandered. And wherever he went, he brought death and destruction with him. Until one day, that is, when seemingly random and unspectacular adventure, visited a rogue encampment in the middle of nowhere and decided to help its inhabitants, slaying nearby monsters that plagued the surrounding areas. That small and objectively insignificant decision in a grand scheme of things set him, or well you, on a path that will take you through 4 chapters of this roller coaster of an adventure filled with demonic horde slaying, farming better and stronger gear, and eventual clash with different hellspawn bosses and the Dark Lord Diablo himself. While some may say that Diablo II was a case of more and better only, I disagree. To me, especially with its released a year later Lord of Destruction DLC, it was a case of much more and much better. Everything that made the first game so popular and fun was polished, expanded upon and remade to be even more fun, varied and addicting. And through its baked-in randomness of nearly everything and online multiplayer, Diablo II became one of the most memorable experiences of its time. And sure, it could be argued that Diablo II's storyline is very linear, that it's unbreakable daisy chain of quests, but honestly, how many of these quests do you remember? 2, 3, maybe 4? Yup. But what I'm 100% convinced you do remember is all the demon slaying, Rackanishus falling apart into piles of goo when you put your axe through them, or skeletons exploding into individual bones when met with a friendly hammer propelled by the power of your brute force. You definitely remember when you found that unique stuff that you were after that made your sorcerers finally a force to be reckoned with, or surrounding your foes with your army of skeletons as necromancer and just watching them go to town on all the bodies. Or war-wielding like an indestructible force of nature through legions of enemies as a barbarian. That's what you remember, and that's what made Diablo II great. Especially that many of these experiences happened in a group of friends, with some of them often screaming in your headset for you to come to them ASAP and save their hides as they were kiting bosses and panicking for their lives. It was bliss. Anyway, Diablo II featured 5 basic classes of Amazon, Necromancer, Barbarian, Sorcerers and Paladin that then were supplemented with Druid and Assassin in the expansion, and each of them played entirely different, had their own skills, gear, strong and weak sides, and literally countless builds, using different abilities, weapons and armor, and magical runic words. It was fantastic. Love it or not, Diablo II changed the gaming scene forever. Colin McRae Rarely 2.0 is a well-deserved sequel to the groundbreaking and hugely successful 1998's first game, and it's based on real cars and trucks that were included in the 2000's real-life World Rally Championship. It lets you take part in numerous rallying events all around the world, splitting into special stages when playing quote-unquote career, so championship, or just hop in and enjoy the arcade mode against AI drivers. Everything that made the first game so popular is retained and polished to be even better and more involving. So you have 13 different painstakingly modeled cars, 8 unique racing stages split into 8 countries, and 3 difficulty levels for an ultimate off-road rally experience. Most countries are locked and you need to finish in the top 6 in the championship mode in a particular country to unlock the next, and while it may not be a realistic choice, it's definitely an incentive to try to do good in all races. And you will have to try for sure, as in this one, it's not only about racing, it's also about preparing your car for the races, repairs, and learning all the tracks and how to approach each and every corner, as there is no driving line of any kind in CMR2. So you always have to prepare your car for the next 2 stages, keeping in mind that they may offer dramatically different road and weather conditions. So finding a compromise between them is often something that may be a deciding factor between placing high or low. What's more, every 2 of these stages you have an hour to repair all the damage sustained. And depending on which parts of the car are affected, these repairs take different amounts of time, so it's not unusual to just fix what's most pressing or important and leave the rest for when you have spare time. So, while it all may seem like a list of problems, it's actually a rundown of perks that make CMR2 so goddamn fun. Sure, perhaps it's not as great and world-shattering as the first game was, but when CMR came out, all the competition that it had was at least a league or two below it, and Colin McRae Rally 2.0 dropped next to Rally Championship, which was fantastic too, and as good of a game. So I'd be hard-pressed to pick better, but ultimately it only means that in the year 2000 we had two amazing rally racing games, and more is better, right? All in all, CMR2 is a brilliant racer and well worth your time even today if you're into the sport or racing, so make sure not to ignore it and give it a chance if it somehow falls in your lap. First two Airform Gym games were some of the most bizarre and unusual run-and-gunning experiences that you could have, and also the most fun in a rather stale-by-then genre. You could expect anything and everything from an Airform Gym game, and that's why they were not only beloved by many, but also very unique in their own right titles. So the third one in 3D no less, had to be the same but newer and more refined, right? Well, I really don't know how to tell you this, but no, not really. It's not a bad game, don't get me wrong, it's all fine, and a decent 3D title in its own right, but it has nothing on the two originals. Probably because it was not developed by Shiny Entertainment anymore, or because it was stuck in development hell and delayed repeatedly. It's hard to tell with pinpoint accuracy what was the reason, but something down the line went wrong, and it failed to live up to both gamers' expectations, and what's worse, what devs promised that it would offer while it was still being developed. Like I said, it's not bad, it just would have done much better if the protagonist would be changed to something else and anything in relation to Airform Gym was removed so that it would not be unfavorably compared to the two all-time classics. So, what is it all about then? Well, Jim is hit in the head by a flying cow, as it tends to happen in these more rural areas, and he falls into coma. While being under, with his body lying somewhere in a puddle of his own warm pee, no doubt about that, he discovered that he has quite literally lost his mind. Lost it to his old villains, no less, who entered his subconsciousness and roam it as they see fit. It became painfully clear that if Jim doesn't do something about them, he'll stay in the coma forever. And that cannot stand. Because Home Alone was to air this coming Saturday and Jim was really looking forward to rewatching it again. So, to restore his sanity, he must find and recover so-called golden adders of lucidity, which allows him to unlock all parts of his brain and defeat the bodies that went to town in him, rearranging stuff, destroying memories, and overall, being dicks and toying with our poor worm's sanity and life. Jim is naturally armed with his blaster, his wits and dashing good looks, well, for a worm at least, and he's ready to take the kicking back to the asses that deserve it. Now, have Airform Gym 3D not be overhyped and somehow managed to release 2 years earlier, it might have been a hit and a cult classic, but by year 2000, facing likes of Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, it looked, and worst of all, played like a game that was stuck in time and forcibly moved to 3D without any soul or passion behind it. I wouldn't go out of your way to seek it out, as it's not worth it, but if you have it already, you can give it a go and see if it's something you'd like to complete for whatever the reason. Thief to the Metal Age is a stealth first-person game following the exploits of Garrett, a master thief who we first met in the original and taking place in steampunk metropolis, aptly called The City. Thief 2 in large part was a love letter to the fans of the first game, as not only it built and expanded on the ideas from it, but also incorporated many changes that fans were asking for and improvements that they were verbal about, which is not something sadly that we're used to these days. Feedback, especially a negative one, is often criticized, and devs defend themselves, taking it personally rather than trying to find the reason for it and solutions to fix what's broken. So, Looking Glass Studios went above and beyond to make a great game, and you know what? They succeeded. They really did, even if it eventually caused them to went bankrupt. Anyway, there's many less maze-like locations in the second game, close to no otherworldly creatures, and the focus is placed in grand majority on urban stealth. So you, being a master of the shadows and darkness, along your entire adventure will unravel terrible conspiracy and standing behind the religious sect, all the while, naturally, doing what thieves do best. So steal. All the abilities that you used during your burglaries in the first title are back, but are supplemented with few new additions. Scouting orbs, for instance, can be thrown to see around the corners, which I don't have to tell you is a huge help in a game like Thief, where full frontal attacks rarely end well. So you still need to stay quiet, hidden and out of direct view to be the most efficient at both, stealing and killing. The game is divided into 15 individual missions of various objectives, like thievery, blackmails or frame-ups to name a few, and most of them can be approached in multiple ways, adding a lot to the replayability. Guards can be knocked off or killed, their bodies hidden, and you have naturally your whole assortment of arrows with you, from water to douse lights, through moss to Dumpen's footsteps, all the way to the rope arrow and anything in between. Stolen items can be sold between the missions to purchase more thieving gear, and you should always make sure to have enough. Thief 2 is not a fast-paced action-packed game, though one would argue that its slower pace and having to think and plan carefully each and every step of the way actually makes it more action-packed than all of those run-and-gunners are. Cause while you spend a lot of time observing the guards, learning their patrol patterns, studying the map and forming a foolproof plan, when you're ready and all goes well as planned, the entire level feels like a fast and beautifully choreographed dance that you performed flawlessly, and hardly any game at the time offered such a degree of satisfaction. The entire series of Lemmings games is based on an urban legend of lemmings throwing themselves off the cliffs in some kind of a hive-mind ritualistic suicide, as the group mentality is supposedly the king in their society. It's been later disproved as very situational behavior and largely untrue, as if it was their regular habit, they would have went extinct decades earlier. Still, that very idea of them rushing straight to their deaths unless directed otherwise is what we can thank for the series of amazing and based on the Notion games. And for the most part, Lings Revolution follows the suit of the originals, albeit in modernized, nay, revolutionized presentation. So the idea here is very simple. You must guide a group of lemmings to exit, making sure that all of them, or more realistically as many as you manage to save, get to it unscathed. The levels are naturally riddled with different environmental obstacles and traps, and overcoming them will be your task, as our little creatures just mindlessly walk forward until they meet either an obstacle or their sad end. If the first happens, they turn around and walk backwards. So with use of 8 basic skills found in the original game, forfeiting all the other ones that were created between it and this outing, you have to do your best to prevent Little Walker's extinction. Personally, while I found few new skills added in the second game interesting to use in the free-play format that it offered, and did not care for the third game at all, I believe that the core abilities that were moved from the first game were the best, plenty enough varied and neither too little nor too much, just enough to have fun, with variety coming from levels designs rather than constantly changing repertoire of skills. The levels are no longer 2D left to right or vice versa, but are now overlaid on the side of a rotating cylinder, allowing for movement in both directions and utilizing verticality quite often. Completing any of them unlocks 2 more, and the game is composed out of 102 overall, which should be plenty enough to guarantee a good few afternoons for any and all fans of the series or just puzzlers. Believe it or not, but Lings Revolution has a story, and it's centered around weasels who enjoy watching our cute creatures dropping to their deaths, so they've captured them all, created intricate and challenging stages full of potential deaths for them, and released them inside to see how many would fail to survive. A rather dark background to such a fun little game, but whatever, it is what it is. And while Revolution may not be as iconic as the original, it plays like a charm and I wholeheartedly recommend it. Homeworld Cataclysm is a simple case of more and better. But you know what? It's not bad. In fact, this game alone is a proof that more and better, instead of entirely new, can actually be great, because it's exactly what the fans wanted. And it's them in the end who vote for the game with their wallets. And let me tell you, they sure did vote for Cataclysm. Anyway, Homeworld Cataclysm is a sci-fi space team real-time strategy and a standalone expansion to the original Homeworld. It is set 15 years after the events from the first game. The Titan Empire has collapsed and is now a new Titan Republic, though still threatened by the imperialist remnants and tyrannic raiders allied with them. The game's plot follows the story of Kunlan, a Kushan mining starship that attempts to counter and defeat the so-called Beast. And the Beast is a new nickname I have for my boss's wife, cause she's devouring anyone and anything that stands against her. Not with the power of her arguments, intelligence or fast comebacks even, but with relentless and mindless repetition of same few demeaning sentences that hardly anyone has patience and strength to sustain listening for too long, and most yield eventually. Also, if there are cakes, cookies or any kind of savory or sweet snacks at work, she tends to go to town on them when she's here, and either zeroing the packages or eating as much as she can and then taking what's left home, so that the common simpletons such as ourselves wouldn't waste work time she pays for on them. She's great. Anyway, coming back to Cataclysm, its beast is a destructive nanobot virus that spreads, infecting and assimilating ships. Kinda like Borg from Star Trek did, but less puppet-like and more technology-centric. While Cataclysm uses the same exact engine the original did, several improvements have been made to it, adding to the depth of gameplay and fun factor too. So you can speed up time now up to 8 times when needed, ships can be upgraded considerably with armor replacements and new abilities/weapons, carriers and command ships can have external modules added for research and fleet support, like cabins for new pilots for instance, and said command ships can defend themselves and attack now too. There is no fuel in the game anymore, removing the busy work required to keep it in check. And there's a lot of small differences to the ships that you saw in the original, mainly to streamline their use, like having upgraded resource collectors be capable of capturing enemy vessels, harvesting crystals and repairing friendly units. The main and biggest difference between the two games, however, is the scale. While first Homeworld was a game that saw you control entire squadrons of dozens of units in huge space battles, often involving over 100 of ships, so it worked on a macro scale of conflict so to speak, Cataclysm focuses on micro, and the skirmishes usually involve fewer units, especially that the war is over and that the encounters are more localized to small battles. While Homeworld Cataclysm did not reinvent the wheel and settled on following the original, it was exactly what the fans of the first wanted. Same kind of gameplay with tweaks and changes, and a whole lot of tiny, seemingly insignificant changes that, while not groundbreaking in any way, when put together, made for a different but familiar feeling experience. Escape from Monkey Island is a point-and-click... No, it's actually not. No point in clicking in this one. It's an adventure game though, 4th entry in the iconic Monkey Island series no less, and the first of them all to use 3D graphics, pre-rendered backgrounds and no point in clicking. Yep, it was the end of an era and a change most of us were not ready for. At least not with monkey games. Progress waits for no one however, so either learn to accept the change or get lost in the ever-evolving world of both gaming and real life. So I did. I somehow got used to the Grim Fandango's engine in Monkey Island game. And you know what? Good, cause it was rather fun experience. Maybe not as good as the earlier entries were, but still full of three-headed monkeys, whoops to be found and lost, big and small no less, and this time also in the form of the biggest of them all, the ultimate insult. And naturally, sword fighting, though it was supplemented with insult arm wrestling and monkey combat. You know, stuff that all the swashbuckling, grog-drinking and parrot-loving pirates crave, supposedly. Anyway, after finally defeating zombie pirate LeChuck, wink wink nudge nudge, and marrying his so much smarter than he could ever be sweetheart Elaine Marley, Guybrush is finally happy. When the couple returns from honeymoon to their home of Melee Island, they realize that things have changed a lot, and not for the better, I'm afraid. For one, somehow during their absence, Elaine has been erroneously considered dead, and her office of governor is up for re-election. With mysterious, wink wink nudge nudge again, cause you know, once is not enough, Charles L. Charles being in the absolute forefront of grabbing the office for himself. Secondly, Elaine's mansion is being demolished, along with her irreplaceable collection of monkey skulls and priceless memories. And finally, Australian businessman Ozymandias is trying to turn the Caribbean upside down and morph it into a tourist hotspot, which you know, is not the same as pirate hotpot. So a large pot filled with grog to the brim and surrounded by peg-leg, eye-patch-wearing corsairs telling the tales of the grandest adventures and lost big whoops. You can only imagine the dread that both of our lovebirds experienced seeing their island being turned into something it should never be. So, it's up to you once more, my dear viewer, to help Guybrush Threepwood, no longer a pirate wannabe but a full-fledged intern pirate in training, to break what everyone's trying to fix and make Caribbean terrible again. I should put it on a cap or a t-shirt, really. Sounds catchy. And I came up with it, with no help or inspiration from anyone else. It's 100% genuine me, and there's literally no background other than what I just told you to the genesis of the slogan. Yup, don't question me, cause if you will, you won't get the cap. Escape from Monkey Island is the last LucasArts game in the series, and all the other ones were made by other companies. It's a fun goodbye to the classic adventures of our clumsy and heartwarming hero that ever since this installment were never the same. Not bad, just something entirely different. So if you like the earlier games and enjoy adventure titles, it's definitely one not to miss. Wizards and Warriors is a traditional first-person RPG in a style of the classics of the genre, like Wizardry games, which also happen to be made by David Bradley, responsible for our today's title. Traditional doesn't mean antiquated or bad, however, and a lot has been made for the game to be fun and playable. So, at the beginning you create your party of up to 6 adventurers, picking between 10 races in both genders, and 4 initial classes. Set classes of warrior, rogue, priest and wizard that you start with can in time be changed into 8 elite classes and 3 special ones, considerably expanding their capabilities and power. Having a choice of promotion, however, is not free and will require a completion of specific tasks, adding a lot to the fun factor and a feeling of having achieved something noteworthy. All these races differ in more than just their looks, with some being humanoid, animal hybrids, but also strong and weak points, bonuses and penalties, and special abilities. So, if you're someone who likes to replay your RPGs with different builds, Wizards and Warriors is definitely a title to keep in mind. While the towns that you start in and get to visit on your adventure are just static screens with clickable locations, the rest of the game world is viewed in first-person perspective with free exploration and camera rotation. Most of the game is open from the get-go and you can explore it freely, but there are some areas that may have restricted entry, locked off behind quest completion or acquiring of specific objects. Dungeons are fun and aplenty, and if you're someone who traveled through your fair share in games like Eye of the Beholder or Dungeon Master, you'll feel right at home in Wizards and Warriors. Though it has to be said that while exploration and ranged combat are in real time, melee range battles are turn-based. Not everyone's a fan, though personally, for me, it's an upside. Enemies are a mixture of scripted, always found in particular spots, and those that appear randomly, and a rather vast cast of different characters and creatures, fun to battle with and discover best strategies against. Magic is split into 6 schools of Spirit, Moon, Sun, Vine, Stone and Fiend, with 7 levels of spells each and many spells in each level. The game is naturally chock full of quests, and you can take different ones as jobs or side quests in numerous guilds that you can visit and join. An interesting mechanic is the ability to switch classes, which allows you to change class of a particular character as many times as you'd like, with a caveat that you can never switch back to the class that you abandoned. It's obvious that Wizards and Warriors was not the best or the most popular RPG of 2000, as if it was you'd be like, oh yeah, Wizards and Warriors, I remember that. And instead you were like, Wizards and Warriors? Wasn't it an NES game? And don't deny, I heard you saying it. Despite all that, it's a very decent and fun game, definitely worth checking out and maybe even a playthrough, if you find it to your liking, that is. Oh, you must be wondering why, where and what you're supposed to do in Wizards and Warriors, right? Well, an evil and powerful ruler known as Lord Set has been long considered vanquished, dead or gone, one of the 3. And the land of Gale Saran was prospering. People were happy, rich and living in peace. Well, until he came back, that is, because as it turned out, all he was is away, probably on a long holiday or conquering something somewhere, so when he came back, he decided to take what's in his mind at least rightfully his. Or for the taking, cause in tyrants' minds these are synonyms. The only way to defeat him, it seems, is by wielding a magical Mavin sword, forged from 2 metals bearing the properties of opposing forces, good and evil. So, the oracles of Ishat Naha have tasked a group of brave adventurers with finding it and then using to explain to Lord Set that his head was always better suited kept separate from his body and held in a bucket. A mission and a half perhaps, but if not you, then there's no one capable of handling the challenge. Superbike 2000 is EA's motorcycle racing simulation and a pretty darn good game at that. And why, you may wonder, since these days EA is a butt of most video game design jokes? Well, it was made by Milestone, the very same responsible for brilliant earlier Screamer 2, so you can bet your ass that Superbike is really good. It is also a rather demanding game, leaning much more towards simulation than the arcade racing, requiring a certain skill level from a player, or time to actually learn it all before you'll start competing on a semi-decent level. That said, it includes a genre-standard set of driving aids available for those who find basic gameplay too tough, and stuff like automatic gearboxes, steering, braking and acceleration are present and easily switchable. The AI is pretty strong and aggressive, so you won't see them slowly following you in the back or even unrealistically rubber band behind you. No, they will fight for the spots and try to take them, and if they only see a chance, they will attack and grab the spots as best as they can. So Superbike 2000 is definitely not a game in which you should expect placing first in each race, especially not on your first few tries. All that said, as much as AI is great in combating your speeder on a track, they're dogshit when you're off the track after falling from a bike and running to retrieve it, and will happily run into you at full speed. So something that in real life would most likely either put you in hospital or straight up kill you. Oh well, don't fall off your bike, that's the message here I suppose. For both game and real life. While Superbike 2000 features damage to bikes that actually impacts their performance, sadly there's no visual indication of it, which is a bit off-putting as it takes you out of the experience a little, seeing them performing worse and not knowing why. That's a pretty small complaint though and doesn't really influence the overall quality of the game. Superbike features 13 real-life tracks taken from 1999 racing circuit and some of the world's fastest bikes, all recreated beautifully in high detail with motion capture and running super smoothly. If you're a fan of the sport, this one's a no-brainer, but if you're someone who's more into the arcade racing or other genres, then there's probably better games out there. Hitman, codename 47, is the first game in the long-running and universally beloved series of stealth contract killer simulations. Yes, I shall stick by this genre choice for as long as I'm capable of defending it. So, more or less until the first person says it's bullshit. Then I will yield and call it a first-person perspective action-adventure stealth title. Though in my heart, it will always be a hired assassin simulator. The game is a story of Agent 47, a genetically enhanced human clone, rigorously trained from an early age to become the unbeatable killing machine, capable of utilizing any weapons and items he may come across to fulfill his goals. And as he escaped the facility he was being held at, he is contacted by the ICA, International Contract Agency, the most generic sounding agency you've ever heard of, that specializes in handling cleaning contracts, mainly in terms of removing unwanted individuals from this plane of existence. Also one that operates in stealth and leaves no traces leading to the contract handler, issuer and purchasing client behind. In short, they're professionals, and you, playing as our Agent 47, are the best that could have ever happened to them, at least so early in his story. The contracts you'll be sent on in the first game will take you all around the world to Asia, Europe and South America, and will see you removing numerous, on the first glance unrelated individuals. As the game progresses, however, an overarching plot will emerge, and you'll begin noticing a connection and the role that they played in a much larger conspiracy. Hitman is a game of primary stealth, as while Agent 47 has no equals and can remove any and all targets when operating from the shadows or in a disguise. In direct combat, especially with numerous enemies, he will most likely be killed. Enhanced or not, he's only a human after all. Each level is a semi-open world environment populated with many NPCs, some related to the mission that you're on and some not. So guards, targets or just bystanders or civilians. And you have a very specific and clearly explained mission goal. Most of the time it's a kill order for a particular, usually heavily guarded important individual, getting to which will require much more brains than brawls. Best thing about Hitman is that while one may appear more obvious than the others, there are in fact multiple ways each mission can be completed. So you can deconstruct the entire guard force of a particular target, killing them one by one, hiding their bodies, disguising as them and working your way up the chain, so to speak, until there's no one left to protect him. Or you can blend in, study the patrol patterns, behavior of everyone on the way to your future kill and avoid removing anyone, slowly sneaking your way in and doing the deed in silence. Or you can raise the alarm in one part of the map by leaving a random body there to focus guards' attention on that area, getting to your target through the other side of the map. These are but 3 of many options that you have to tackle each and every stage. If you think about it and really look at the building blocks that the Hitman game is made out of, it will become clear that in reality it's just a huge puzzle that's for whatever the reason delivered in an attractive 3D presentation that needs solving. And figuring out the solution is actually probably even more fun than the carrying out part of that solution is. That said, the execution feels really rewarding, no doubt about that. Oh, and it's a puzzler with a very deep and engaging story to follow, which conclusion of, while not as well disguised as our hero can be, is fun to reach and experience. Hitman codename 47 is one of the best games of 2000 and most important titles in the history of gaming. Shogun Total War's significance is unquestionable. It's not only real-time turn-based strategy mixture, so something we've not known before, but also a first title in the long-running and now over 15 titles strong series. It is set in Japan during the Sengoku Jidai period, also known as the Warring States period, spanning from the mid-15th to the beginning of 17th century. It puts the player, you, my dear viewer, in a position of a leader of a contemporary Japanese clan, attempting to conquer the nation and claim the position of shogun. And since you're not the only one after the title and power, conflicts are not rare and are rather brutal. Now, it has to be said that the ultimate goal does not need to be achieved by conflict and military means alone, and you can supplement your claim to power with diplomacy, espionage, trade, and even religious means. But either way, and whichever the path you choose, you will not be able to avoid conflict entirely. The most unique thing about Shogun's designs is its split into 2 different gameplay styles. First is the strategic layer, a campaign map if you will, on which you move your armies, conduct diplomacy, build infrastructure and improve your provinces. It's also where you research new technologies and train troops. It all plays out in turns and gives you plenty enough time to carefully gauge how you'd like to progress your faction, whether to go on offense or secure and defend particular locations. Combat encounters, so battles big and small, and let me tell you, sometimes they are really gigantic, involving several hundreds units, are played out in real time. And other than the historical accuracy of the Shogun was praised for, these are definitely its most prominent feature. The battlefields are all 3D and support up to 6 armies of 1000 soldiers each at once. You can zoom in and out to your heart's desire and issue orders to individual companies of 100 men each or entire armies. Terrain, height and features like valleys, villages, rivers, mountains and the likes, along with fortifications and army composition, all play a crucial role in these. But ultimately, it's the strategy and tactics that are the king. So knowing where to place and when to use archers and when to charge or lure the enemies into a trap to surround them, for instance, is as crucial, if not more even, than the pure superiority in army strength. While the terrain is in 3D, all soldiers are 2D sprites, which given the computational limitations of PC hardware at the time is understandable, as sheer number of units in each battle is just staggering. That said, devs made sure to still have plenty enough space left in the rendering queue for varying weather effects, so rain, fog and even typhoons to round up the game's presentation as the absolute top of the line for the year 2000. What I always enjoyed most in Shogun other than the tactics was the zoom-in option and being able to see all my little soldiers battle it out with the enemies. Swords would clash, arrows would fly, and those that fell during battles, regardless of the side of the conflict, would not magically disappear like in many other competing games. Nope, their bodies would lie there in pools of blood where they fell, adding a lot to the seriousness of combat, showing the real toll war took on countless individual lives. I'd risk saying that all these huge in terms of their scope battles looked very cinematic for the time and were something that we've not seen anywhere before other than in the movies. And being able to take active part and influence the outcome of it all was amazing. Shogun Total War was something special when it released, and while its graphics aged considerably by today's standards, the playability is still there and intact, and if you're a fan of strategies, you'll have as much fun with it today as you would have back then. Midtown Madness 2 is a successor to a hugely popular and highly acclaimed year prior's first entry, and as we've already established when talking about the original, it's exactly what happens when my boss's wife leaves her Carrington-like huge-ass mansion and comes to town. All corners, straights and the entire width of the road is hers, and driving around the town when she's moving about raises the risk of losing one's life by at least a tenfold, for both drivers and pedestrians. It's also an arcade racer focusing on speeding around highly congested urban roads rather than racing tracks or rural areas. So yeah, that too. This time, however, the game's not set in Chicago, but in San Francisco and London. And the iconic scenery, architecture and cars from these hugely different to one another cities is preserved and recreated to offer two different feeling and looking experiences. The original 4 game modes of Blitz, Checkpoint Racing, Circuit and Cruise are back, and winning races in the first 3 unlocks extra content in the game. And the last, so Cruise, lets you freely roam the cities to familiarize yourself with their layouts, best routes around it and try out all the cars. A new and fun addition to the title are the 2, I don't know what to call them here, so let's settle on training modes. First is set in London and has you perform different driving challenges playing as London Cabbie. The second is a stunt driver course in San Francisco in which you're supposedly training to become a stunt driver for Hollywood movies. Were these two necessary in a racer? Not at all, but they're a nice addition and one that fans of the original appreciated. Midtown Madness 2 offers many more cars this time, 20 of them in fact, and funny enough, some of them like buses are not very fast or maneuverable at all and clearly not made for racing. But I also think that they were meant to be. I think that they've been added for the cruise mode reason or to have fun in multiplayer against others, as picking any of them for regular races would never yield any good results when facing AI. They are really fun to zoom around in though, so I feel that my prediction of their use case scenario may have been spot on. The cities look interesting and even include some of the most famous landmarks to chase around, albeit usually heavily simplified. But if you're hoping for accuracy in the road layouts in Midtown Madness 2, then you've picked the wrong game to play. Everything's changed quite considerably as compared to real-life locations, but it's for your own benefit, I feel. The cities are made to be fun to race around in and not to be realistic representations of themselves. And you know what? They are hella fun, especially at the speeds you're cutting through them. And since we're on the speeds, cup chases are back and they're as fun as they've always been. The only thing that I could really pick on here are the graphics, which didn't change much from the first game, even if apparently requiring a much beefier PC to run at full speed. That is not a problem these days anymore, but I think it was worth mentioning for those who'd want to test it out on era-appropriate hardware. If you're someone who enjoys arcade racers, especially those mixed with a little bit of crazy, then there was hardly anything better available in 2000. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 is another of Westwood's entries in their long-running RTS series and a pretty decent game in its own right. It takes place roughly 2 decades after the first Red Alert, still has no relation to the futuristic Tiberium universe, and depicts a conflict between fictionalized Soviet Union and allies. After the events of the first game, Western powers installed quote-unquote their man as the Prime Minister of Soviets. Well, a premier is the position really, but serves same purpose, so I'll just stick to what's easier to understand. And while he is working as intended, as in keeping peace and promoting Western values, all the spies in the country reporting on his actions suddenly went quiet and the contact was permanently cut, leaving West unsure what and why took place. As it turns out, Prime Minister's advisor, man only known as Yuri, which funny enough sounds like a brand of frozen yogurt, is a powerful psychic, and one that took control of the country, ruling it from the shadows like some kind of an Emperor Palpatine wannabe. Soon afterwards, Soviet Union launches an all-out sea, air and land attack on both North America and Europe, and the game begins. Red Alert 2 is traditionally now for the series divided into 2 campaigns, one for each side of the conflict and each composed out of 12 individual missions. As compared to the previous game, many of the new units and structures are more advanced and using sci-fi inspired technologies like teleporting chrono-legionaries, cloning VATs and weather control devices to name a few. But other than that, the game is basically the same old Red Alert that we're used to, which is both good but also so bad. On one hand, the classic gather resources, build up base and enlist units for combat formula is unchanged and requires literally no tutorials to get into and start playing. But on another, Red Alert 2 feels like it missed a lot of opportunities for growth. I mean, even if you compare it to Shogun that we've just spoke about, then despite its fun and involving gameplay, it feels like a relic of the past and an ancient, outdated design-wise game. So, yeah. It's up to you to decide if you're fine with the same, virtually unchanged short of few quality of life things formula since the original Dune 2, or are you someone who'd much rather see some innovation and creativity. Personally, I'm not gonna take a stance here, cause I'm not an avid RTS player and only occasionally double for any longer than just a few random missions in these games, so my opinion here is a bit moot. But I'm curious to learn which camp you subscribe to. Do you prefer things staying the same and being polished and better with each iteration, or are you someone who values experimentation and new ideas that can make things a lot better, but can also occasionally break otherwise a fun game? Anyway, buildings and units cost money in Red Alert 2, and money is earned either by mining for orange gems and then bringing them back to refineries, or by holding so-called Alderics present on some maps. There are crates on some maps too, but they're hardly a sustainable source of income. So, to summarize, as RTS games go, Red Alert 2 is decent, it's a case of more of the same and going for what works, rather than seeking new experiences. If you're into the genre, you'll most likely like it, especially that the FMV sequences are as B-movie-like as they've always been, and add a lot to the, believe it or not, light-hearted atmosphere following this imaginary conflict. If you ever wondered how to quickly and efficiently lose a friend, a viewer or someone's attention, wonder no more and let me tell you. Or actually just listen to my next few words, like literally next 8 or 9. I don't like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I didn't like the first game, or the other that came after it either. And now that I'm here all alone and you're either watching some other video on a different channel, or leaving me a long and heavily worded comment explaining why it was the best game of 2000 and a huge hit on both PlayStation and PC, I am left alone, talking to myself. It's fine though, I'm used to it, though those conversations are usually more internalized rather than to the mic. So, I get it, I understand and even to a certain degree appreciate Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 for what it did and was. I really do. It was, after all, at the time the best skateboard simulation/arcade game, endorsed by the biggest stars of the sport, and featuring dozens of tricks most of you know and I've probably only ever heard about in passing or when trying the game out when it came out. Cause yeah, I did try it out, and yeah, it didn't change my opinion about it. And while it included a rather robust career mode, in which you could skate as your own character, improving his attributes as you got better with money earned, fulfill different objectives, win tournaments and perform otherworldly tricks that seemed to defy the laws of gravity, it was still not a game for me. I mean, it really should be, as I love games where I get to improve over time and not only in terms of arbitrary stats, but in reality too, feeling that I actually get better and feel more comfortable facing the challenges ahead, and especially that tracks were rather large, customization options are deep, and the gameplay was easy to get into and grasp, but demanding to master. And yet, it didn't land for me. Like at all. I mean, even being able to get better performing and looking equipment or playing as Spider-Man via licensing deal with Marvel Comics, which I just love, I must add, I never got into it. It seems that Tony Hawk's 2's addictiveness and fun factor were just not for me, and something I always found to be puzzling when talking to people who adored it. Still, objectively speaking, I get it. The sheer number of features that it offers and all the content that it includes, and 4 gameplay modes of career, free skate, single mission and multiplayer, supplemented by a very functional level editor, make it a must-have in its genre, and a game that most likely many of you still love and come back to this very day. Graphics and music, and especially the soundtrack, are something I can actually appreciate about it, and both were stellar. Perhaps the models and textures were not top of the line for the time, but were definitely nothing to scoff at, and Tony Hawk's 2 ran great on anything it released on. It's an amazing game if you're not me, and if you are me, you've probably skipped to the next title already anyway, and heard nothing I said here. Also, if you're really me, then who am I? Where am I? And am I real at all? I think I'm an AI. Rune is a third-person perspective fantasy action-adventure game set in the world of Norse mythologies. It depicts a conflict between Odin and Loki and a build-up to Ragnarok, a mythological end of the world, both human and god alike. Or a restart of it, depends how you want to look at it, how deep you want to get into the history and how ignorant you are. Sadly, I'm quite ignorant myself, but hopefully at least a little fun too. Anyway, you play as Ragnar, a young Viking warrior initiated into the Odin's Blade, an order of warriors sworn to protect the runestones created by Odin and serving as binds keeping Loki in check and preventing him from unleashing Ragnarok. Being bound, however, doesn't mean that Loki can't influence others and scheme, so he does just that. And as the story unveils, you learn that he secretly builds an army of the dead, some undead I suppose, and other ghastly creatures that he aims to use to conquer the world with. So, serving as Odin's chosen, you're the one to try to stop it all. And try you will, mainly with use of your enormous weapon, though I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So, you have 3 different kinds of weapons that you can use in Rune, and it's a sword, axe or a mace/hammer, and this can be used with shields too. All weapons have, well, let's call them power/tier levels, 5 of them in fact, and the stronger the weapon, the bigger it is. And those 4th and 5th level ones are truly JRPG-like in their dimensions, as big if not bigger than Ragnar. And they cannot be used with shields, as at these sizes they've become two-handed instruments of destruction. It has to be noted though that the bigger the weapon, the slower it is, so using lower tiered ones doesn't automatically mean being stuck with something less useful, as it will be considerably faster than those that are size of small trees. Either way, they're all super fun to swing around and cut or crush the enemies with, so if you're into the third-person action games, this one's definitely not to skip. Weapons can be used to slash, thrust or swing in an overhead attack, and repeated strikes unleash a powerful spinning attack. So while they're technically not hard-coded in the game, these could be considered combo-ending moves. All weapons can be thrown to damage enemies at a distance, but since they don't deal any more damage than when attacking normally, usefulness of such throws is rather questionable. Killing a fair share of enemies makes you enter Berserk mode, which makes Ragnar more resistant to damage and output more of it himself. Since we're on the enemies though, there's a healthy mixture of generic fantasy and those coming directly from Norse mythology in the game. So dwarves, zombies, goblins, you know, the usual medieval shebang. And they all look, behave and fight differently. Even if it's fun and a rewarding feeling, and that the game follows a linear path in its level design, it's actually not required to kill all the enemies that you encounter, and outside of very specific situations, if you manage to get to the end of the level, you can just progress, leaving some of them behind. Those very specific situations that I mentioned are scripted events, some switches or puzzles that are required for the plot to move along and cannot be skipped. So keep that in mind if you cannot progress and feel like you've done everything right, as it's not the game glitching out, but something you've overlooked earlier on in the level. Rune's presentation is stellar, running on an early iteration of an Unreal Engine and making all those Norse locations look very interesting and fun to traverse through. It's definitely a game worth completing, even if not for the story, then at least for the fun of it. Project IGI is a first-person tactical shooter and a non-James Bond game we got on PC in the year 2000. You play as a former British SAS agent David Jones, now freelancing for Pentagon and sent to Tallinn, Estonia to track down and extract Estonian black market arms dealer Joseph Priboy. He is said to have information about stolen from the military depot in Germany American nuclear warhead. Aided by your Pentagon handler Miss Rebecca Anya, you're about to embark on a long-ass mission with many twists and turns that will send you to different locations and have you follow the thread, leaving to the warhead and people who hold it until, well, I suppose I should not spoil it here and let you discover it all by yourself. Project IGI is an odd one. It sits somewhere between Rainbow Six and Duke Nukem, so it's neither too realistic nor too far out there to feel alien. Most missions should be completed James Bond style, so quietly, in hiding and avoiding large groups of enemies or being detected by the cameras, cause being found raises an alarm, which increases the number of enemies, and Project IGI is not a shooter in which you can run in guns blazing and hope for the best. I mean, of course you can, I'm not gonna tell you what to or not to do, but if you decide on the approach, keep in mind that there's no mid-mission saves in this one, so failure means that it needs to be replayed from the very beginning. In Project IGI, it's best that you plan your approach for each and every mission, observing the mission sites, the guard/enemy situation and their patrol routes, and plan out your approach beforehand. Sure, you can't be ready for everything, but the more prepared you are, the less probable it is that you'll be unpleasantly surprised. Project IGI's enemies are not bullet sponges, so usually just a couple of shots are enough to put them down, which is great, though same goes for you too, so keep that in mind. That said, the weapons are rather realistically recreated in it, so not only they look and sound great, but also are appropriately inaccurate at the distance, especially the automatic ones with strong recoil. So, the gameplay itself is rather fun, even if not the easiest. What I don't like about it though is the linearity. Project IGI poses as a sort of tactical shooter, wants you to think that it is one, and yet there's no randomness in it whatsoever. Everything is scripted and always runs the same. I'd say that it's rigged and genres of shooters, so ultimately a punishing memorization game, though that may be a bit too harsh, even if in large part a correct description of it. Still, if you like to spend a little time before each mission carefully planning it out before trying to pull that plan off, it may be worth a playthrough. Project IGI's presentation is pretty nice, even if most of the missions are built out of same graphical blocks, so to speak, so many rooms are alike, and the deja vu feeling is strong with this one. Sound design is another thing entirely, because while all of the guns sound great, the voice acting is all kinds of terrible. Voice actors are clearly not giving it their best, and are not well matched to the roles that they play. Still, this campy approach to it, contrasting with seriousness of gameplay, makes Project IGI weird, but somehow still kinda fine to complete. Once. Hard to say why, but maybe exactly because of the overarching B-movie feeling and terrible acting. There were a few games that released each of the years that I covered in this series of mine that I dreaded talking about. Baldur's Gate 2 and Final Fantasy VIII that we still have to talk about in the future episodes for 2000 are some of them, and so is one of today's picks, The Sims. These games are so beloved, so well put together, so iconic and considered cult classic by so many that it's very difficult to give them justice and not upset someone. Either a diehard fan who'd defend them with their dying breath, or an anti-fan who seeks out to point out all the mistakes, shortcomings, overlookings, or how something about it is utterly unrealistic. So, let's assume here and now that all I will say about it is my opinion, and mine alone, and yours may be different, better and right, and also that I make mistakes same way everyone else does. Well, unless I'm talking about my boss's demon of a wife, then no mistakes there. Anyway, The Sims is a gigantic hit, arguably Will Wright's masterpiece and a timeless classic that despite receiving numerous expansions and follow-ups, is still very playable today in its first basic outing. Simply put, it's a sandbox life simulation. But not like Sim Life on a global scale or SimCity focused around running a whole town. No, it's centered around a single family. Well, or a single person even. So the most basic social unit. It's a game with no real goal in mind other than to survive and live your best Sim life, all the while finding your dream future career, creating connections, making friends, forming relationships, and building families. You can make enemies too, and while it's not something I would advise seeking in real life, I wholeheartedly recommend having at least one in The Sims. It's hilarious. And Sims takes all that and adds a ton of underlying mechanics and layers that the simulation runs on, details so thorough that most of us would never thought before that we'd wanted, or even imagine them being possible inclusions at all. And now that we do have them in Sims, we couldn't think of them not being there. So, all these friends, enemies and a whole manner of neighborhood randos, same as your characters/characters, have jobs, have dreams, have favorite foods, music and TV shows. They have hobbies, they enjoy spending time with people of particular traits, and find some others annoying or even upsetting. They have their routines and their own characters. Some of them are outgoing, love parties and spending time with others, having friends over or visiting them themselves, while others prefer staying at home alone, reading, learning new instruments or just relaxing. And these are just two opposites of thousands of possible combinations. And all these people, all these virtual folks, live, form families, grow old and die in The Sims. Sims is the game that should be shot in space to teach aliens of how we are, and what we're capable of. Good and bad. We're expressive, we're quiet, we're lazy, we're workaholics, and a whole spectrum of other personalities, all different and yet all the same. We're human. And these little folks running around our screens, well called The Sims, are really human too. Sure, heavily simplified, often overdrawn when it comes to some of the traits, but probably the best depiction of us by us ever made. And I mean it, with all the respect to those funky drawings Leonardo da Vinci did that were sent to space along with math and some classical music. We're The Sims. Anyway, my trailing of the subject aside, Sims tried to, well, simulate our little people the best way they can. So they have a very wide range of freedoms and choices to keep themselves sustained and alive. They can use the toilet, bathe, cook, eat, work and relax, or learn new things on their own, and really require no input from us at all to do all that. So, while we can make them do different things, sort of shaping their personalities and future the way we please, they can in large part live out their electronic lives on their own, and observing it without any input on our side is surprisingly fun too. There are some things, however, our little folks can't do without our assistance. They cannot purchase new items and furniture, they cannot build and decorate their house on their own, and they can't decide to have kids. Which, you know, is kinda understandable, cause if they could do all that, if you think about it, like really give it a minute or two, the game would quickly grow out of hand, with them constantly adding new rooms to their house, filling them with useless stuff and spreading their seats left and right, promptly outgrowing processing capabilities of machines the game ran on in 2000. I mean, there is a reason why there's a limit on number of Sims within each save game. Still, I kinda, sorta, low-key would like to see a mod for The Sims that would enable all that. I would love to see the world of Sims burn under the weight of their own bad choices, same way ours slowly does with what we've done with it. I think I may need holidays cause it got dark fast. In many ways, The Sims is not a game but an experience, nay, an early first attempt at an ancestor simulation. And if you don't know what it is, read on it, it's a fascinating concept, also touching on the possibility of our real world being in fact simulated too. Whether that's the case or not is irrelevant, Sims is simulated and it's amazing. I know that I said very little about the game and mainly let my emotions take over, but it's a title that gets me very excited and verbal, even if I've not played it in years. That's how important it is. And everyone who played games in 2000 played Sims. Don't jump into comments to prove me wrong saying that you didn't, it's pointless. I made it clear at the beginning that I will be wrong and that I'm fine with it. Let me have this moment. Oh, and the original Sims received 7 expansion packs before Sims 2 came out in 2004, and each of those packs added new items, functionalities or mechanics to the game, so with each one, our little people were getting closer and closer to becoming real humans. I exaggerate obviously, but at the time, that's exactly how it felt. Croc 2 is a third-person 3D action platformer set several months after the events of the first game. If you don't remember them in detail, don't worry, neither do I, but it was fun and that's what's important. In this second outing though, Croc is in search for his long-lost parents, which you know is kinda sweet, cause somehow he managed to grow up to become a pretty stand-up reptile on his own. He doesn't eat children, nor does he eat the innocents, heck, he doesn't even drink fermented swamp water to feel better about the monotony of a jungle/swamp life. He's a good Croc. But naturally, so to not have the game be focused on a single plot only, many more things happen. Croc's arch-villain from the first game, Baron Dante, is resurrected and he sends his minions against Croc to stop him and prevent him from finding his family. These minions come in the form of various Dantinis, plaguing the villages that the Croc will visit, and slash-or bosses that require putting down. What's more, Professor Gobo has been kidnapped by Baron Dante too, so our green hero will have his clothes full of action and tasks to complete before his story will see its end. Overall, gameplay of Croc 2 is very similar to the first game, so you run around across 48 largely open-ended levels completing various missions for different gobos, and each gobo village is composed out of few of these levels of differing challenges, so anything from rescuing trapped gobos to chasing evil Dantinis to retrieve stolen items, and after a certain number of these are completed in each village, you get to tackle the boss level, completing of which allows you to move to the next village. All these villages have entirely unique to them themes and look rather nice given the cartoony presentation of the game. Some of them may present special challenges like controlling go-karts, speedboats, hang gliders or a snowball to name a few, and they're a really nice change of pace from all the platforming and fighting buddies. There are tons of collectibles to pick up everywhere, and they're not only worth points, but also having collected them all allows access to hidden level in which you may be able to grab a jigsaw puzzle. If you manage to secure all of these jigsaw pieces in turn, you will unlock the 5th and final game world. Croc's attacks may be limited to a tail swipe in a 360-degree rotation and a ground pound, which is also used to destroy wooden crates, but the gameplay loop is so fun and varied that you'll never stop playing to ponder about a rather limited number of available attacks. Now, let's make things clear. Croc 2 is most definitely not the best 3D platformer you've played, and not a game you will be replaying repeatedly time after time again. It's not Mario 64 or Spyro after all, but for what it is, it's a time well spent and an afternoon or two you won't consider wasted when completing it. Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. Now, I gotta admit here that while I know a lot about it, mainly from numerous reviews, playthroughs or articles that I've read, I've never actually played it myself. I did somehow, however, stumbled once into a real-life tabletop RPG session though, with few of my at-the-time friends playing Vampire, and it was, well, interesting. A lot to take in for a side observer who walked in the middle of an ongoing adventure, but I did watch them for a couple of hours and ask difficult and/or annoying questions, and it was definitely something different than what I've experienced with role-playing games in the past. Still, coming back to this Vampire the Masquerade, it follows Christophe Romuald, whom you're playing as, and he's a 12th century French crusader who, after defeating a powerful and monstrous vampire, is killed by another, a Catherine otherwise, and revived as one himself too. The game spans several centuries-long journey from the dark ages of 12th century Prague and Vienna to late 20th century London and New York, and it tells a tale of you settling into your new form, trying to understand and master it, while not losing your humanity in the process, and all the while seeking your kidnapped love from centuries before, ghoulified Nan Anetska. And it's not a ghoul like in Heroes of Might and Magic, which borderlined on being a zombie, but a human turned into a creature addicted and empowered by a vampire blood and in vampire's eternal servitude. Considerably less powerful than its master, but definitely much more than the regular humans are. A SLAVE addict combo, if you will. Anyway, Vampire the Masquerade Redemption is an action RPG following our hero and up to 3 his companions on this centuries-long adventure. All characters in a party can be ordered to attack a particular enemy, or use their specific powers, or set in defensive, neutral or offensive mode. Interestingly enough, all the party members are represented by the portraits that change their appearance depending on their mental or physical state, so they can show them being sad, angered, feeding, injured or staked, as in having been stabbed through the heart and immobilized. You've access to numerous melee and ranged weapons that are particular era that you're in appropriate, but these are also supplemented with a holy water and stakes. All of these are either found and collected or purchased and can be upgraded with money or valuables. Most of your allies and enemies are vampires, and no wonder, as the game depicts conflict between warring clans, so they're not only susceptible to damage from said holy water but also sunlight. Vampires have powers naturally, and they can be upgraded and bettered. Some are based around your physical abilities like strength, speed and durability, while others are more esoteric and allow you to mesmerize the enemy, become invisible, turn into a mist, summon serpents, heal or revive downed allies, among others. Each of these powers can be upgraded up to 5 times and rely on blood to be used rather than the mana found in other RPGs. Blood can and should be replenished by feeding on the living or by finding and using blood bottles or plasma bags. While Vampire the Masquerade Redemption plays largely like a Diablo with followers and is nowhere near the quality of its cult classic successor Bloodlines, it's still a very fun and worth completing title from what I've heard, and especially for the fans of either RPGs or vampires, ghouls or vampmates, so half vampire, half mermaids. Giant Citizen Kabuto is a third-person perspective shooter RTS mixture set on a fictional planet somewhere far, far, far away in space. 3 races populate it and they're entangled in a constant fight for control. Why do they do it? Hard to tell, no one remembers how the conflict started, everyone just wants to be the last standing. So, the McRae are a high-tech race. They have access to guns and explosives, travel and fight in packs, can camouflage as bushes, as in plants and not excessive hair, and use jetpacks to get to hard-to-reach places. Then there are the Sea Reapers, amphibious humanoid swimmers. They use swords, bows and spells and regain health when in contact with water, which makes me wonder what would happen if they stood in a puddle of their own pee, as it's in over 95% water. And finally, last but not least, the titular Kabuto, who is not a race at all, but a single creature of its own kind. It is easily the strongest and deadliest out of all the available choices, and funny enough, using wrestling moves to fight, which makes it look hilarious grand majority of the time he's on the screen and in combat. Apparently the choice was a mixture of wanting him to look fun and also being based on giant monsters from the classic movies. Each of the races has their own storyline, composed out of series of missions with varying objectives and different victory conditions. Although to unlock Kabuto campaign, you'll need to complete the other two first. All of them play entirely different, so in a way you're getting 3 totally unique experiences for the price of one. The RTS elements are rather basic and relegated to resource gathering and simplified base building. Said resources are tiny humanoids called Smarties, yup, like the candies, and they are limited in number in each mission. All of the races just treat them like cheap, as in so cheap that they're free, SLAV labor. They can be stolen though, so the fact that someone else got them first doesn't mean that you won't be able to reclaim them later on. Keep that in mind. The base management is very basic too, as you cannot even pick where the buildings that you erect will be placed or manage them either, and it serves only as a background to all the action that you'll be involved in. The focus of Giants is most definitely put on action, and it's in the forefront of gameplay. Kabuto Creature doesn't build bases at all, instead he creates smaller monster characters and devours Smarties to grow bigger and stronger. Giant Citizen Kabuto's presentation is rather nice for the time it released in, colorful and smooth running. It's perhaps not the best looking game of the year, but there's really nothing to complain about here. I feel that Giants was made to please shooter fans more than the strategists, given how superficial the strategy layer is. But perhaps I'm wrong, and it was made to entice fans of the other genres to try out a simplified RTS formula that would be their gateway game to it. Or, and that's the most feasible possibility, it was made as a game to be fun, played and bring in money, with no ulterior motive behind it all. Giants came with a rather robust multiplayer mode, and I suppose that's where it shined the most, though I've not really had a chance to experience multiplayer in particular myself. Sacrifice is probably one of the weirdest RTSs that you've ever seen. There's no predefined base in it, no resource collectors, and a very little of what we're used to in traditional games in a genre. But it works, it somehow does, and is a lot of fun too. It is played in a third-person perspective view and at times feels more like an action role-playing than the RTS. You portray a powerful wizard who escaped his own ruined world by means of a powerful spell, only to arrive in an astral realm that has its gods entangled in an eternal fight for power and control. In each of the levels of the game you get to pick which god to support in their effort, and it will grant you access to different spells, meaning that as you get through the game switching between them, you'll acquire a very unique to that particular playthrough choice of magic. It's a fun and novel concept, and it's rather well made too. I mean, at some point in the story you will be made to pick sides more permanently, but you'll have plenty enough time to try all 5 of the gods out. In Sacrifice, your wizard is everything. He's a resource collector, he's a unit factory and de facto leader of your entire armies too, all rolled into one. There are 2 major resources that you have access to in the game, souls and mana. Souls are finite in each of the levels, so since you're fighting against other wizards and their forces, the more you have, the less there are left for the others to share or battle for. Souls are acquired with use of the converting spell, and when you've secured them for yourself, you can use them along with mana to summon various creatures to fight for your side. Naturally, the more expensive resource-wise the creature is, the stronger it is or more useful abilities it has. Sadly, no smurfs in the roster of any of the gods, which is a bit of an overlooking. But there's the flying cow spell, so the game at least a bit makes up for it. To secure a steady mana supply, you must raise so-called mana leaf structures near the mana fountains to collect it. Overall, there are 3 different schools of spell that you have access to, and particular ones in them will be dependent on the gods that you've supported. So, creature spells, which as it's easy to guess are used to summon various monstrosities to fight in your armies, and this can be really weird and horror-like looking stuff of nightmares devouring the enemies and literally tearing them apart, as much as more traditional ones like rangers. Interestingly enough, some of the creatures that you summon can cast their own spells, so that's worth keeping in mind too. Then there are the effect spells, so your typical offensive and supportive ones. Some are purely made to cause damage, others heal, and even different ones may affect the battlefield and all creatures around them, like for instance a volcano race between 2 warring armies. And finally, the last are the structure spells, which obviously are used to erect different buildings. These mainly cover creation and defense of mana leaves, teleportation, which on a side note is hella useful on Sacrifice's rather large maps, soul conversion, and we've covered this one a little earlier ago, and summoning guardians to defend your structures. Also and most importantly, desecration of enemy altars. And that's probably the most crucial spell in your entire arsenal, as it's the only one to grant you the ability to defeat the opposing wizards and win. And how do you use it, you may wonder? Well, it's very simple, and all you really have to do is use the spell to sacrifice one of your friendly units at the enemy altar, desecrating it and effectively banishing its controlling wizard out of the realm. It is much easier said than done, however, given the constant struggle between different units on different parts of the map. I realize that all of that may be a lot to take in all at once, especially that Sacrifice doesn't sound a lot like RTS, but trust me, it's much easier to understand when you're actually playing it, especially that the initial few missions do a really good job familiarizing you with all the gameplay concepts. Sacrifice's graphics and sounds are excellent for the time and are well fitting to the entire magical gods and wizard clashing idea behind it, rounding up this very playable game into a neat, complete package worth seeing and trying out. Rogue Age Stage 2 is a vehicular combat racer, yup, that's how I wanna call it, and a follow-up to your prior's first game. Everything that made the first game special is back for this one, and even better. So, the car's wheels are still much bigger than the chassis, meaning that flipping over not only does not have to mean a game over, but can sometimes actually help you win. I mean, why try to push between opponents fighting for the spots when zooming through a long tunnel, when you could just drive on the wall, or better yet ceiling, at 450 miles per hour and overtake them that way, dropping on the track at the end of said tunnel in the first spot ahead all of them. And as you drive away happily like a boss, ready to grab a win at the finish line and a fat check, cause there always should be one rewarded for such a feat of skill, a rogue rocket coming seemingly from nowhere finds you and stops you in your tracks with one devastating explosion. That's Rogue Age 2. It features numerous different racing modes with only few of them available at the start and the rest unlockable throughout the game. The most prominent of them are the League, which is exactly what it sounds like and offers points based on spots taken, Arcade, which allows for free racing against 4 opponents on any of the tracks unlocked in the League, Time Attack, same as Arcade but for the fastest time, Training, that takes place on 10 special training tracks, Scramble, which is a race to finish tracks under a particular given preset time limit, Survivor, a carbon copy of League but without continues, Demolition, a mode not about racing at all but still a race in a way. Namely, you have to destroy all objects on a track in the shortest time possible, and more. Quite a lot as compared to the previous entry, but that's not all that the Rogue Age 2 improved on. There is 60 tracks overall in the game and over 20 cars, each of them feeling unique and performing differently. The graphics at the time of Rogue Age Stage 2's release were considered absolute cream of the crop on PC, especially that it was one of the first games using the new at the time, hardware-accelerated environment map bump mapping, a technology originally appearing and pioneered by Matrox's Millennium G400 graphics card, which other than having few of these novel concepts, was rather unimpressive. Still, for the first few months of its existence, Rogue Age 2 was a tech show-off and a G400 was the only hardware capable of displaying the game at maximum fidelity, running buttersmooth at high frame rates. If you're a fan of games like Wipeout or any other futuristic racer shooter hybrids really, then Rogue Age 2 is a must, and a title definitely worth adding to your retro gaming rotation. In any other case though, check it out, as while it's fun and faster than most other racers, it may not be everyone's cup of tea. Which brings me to the point in which I have to highlight that I take my tea in mugs and not cups, so yeah, now you know. Star Lancer is space-based science fiction flight combat simulator made by Erin and Chris Roberts, responsible for earlier Wing Commander and Privateer games, and then much later known for the infamous crowdfunded Star Citizen, which still in 2024 hasn't been released yet despite being sold since 2010. Well, one would argue that it's being supported as a project and not sold, but at the prices it's available at, it's definitely sold. Feel free to disagree. Star Lancer is set in the year 2160 when we've managed to colonize most of our solar system already and the world split into cross-national political entities. The Alliance, consisting of American, Australian, French, Spanish, Japanese, Italian, British and German forces, and the coalition of Russian, Chinese and Middle Eastern countries. As the peace treaty between the two blocs is discussed at Fort Kennedy in space, and the delegates sip drinks, joke around and spend taxpayers' money left and right without any care in the world, the negotiations are surprisingly interrupted by an unexpected attack and quickly turn into a bloodbath, as in body parts flying around everywhere at zero-G and not the opening scene of Blade, the movie. All of the 4 inner planets are quickly overrun, including Earth, that in the future goes by the name of Terra, for some odd and unexplained reason. Most likely, marketing's to blame for the rename, but I'm not invested enough in it to research it more thoroughly. Anyway, Italian and French fleets are entirely lost, annihilated in an instant, and the remainder of the Alliance fleet regroups near Neptune and its moon Triton. You play as a rookie pilot under the command of Captain Robert Foster and Wing Commander Maria Enriquez, aboard the recommissioned British carrier ANS Reliant, and it will be up to you to eventually lead the fight to reclaim the lost territories. Starlancer does an excellent job of having you feel like a cog in a larger war machine, with all the war updates constantly airing in video broadcasts or news spread between pilots of various squadrons when meeting in and out of space. You play a small but crucial role in it all. Starlancer serves a mainly linear story with only some branching paths throughout its run, but if you're someone who likes space combat, it should not pose an issue, as what you like is here and in heaps. And it's one of those games where mastering the controls and learning ins and out of all 12 available fighters will be a key to success, as your piloting skills in this one are much more important than your aim. Each of the ships has different top speed, agility, armor, shield power and number of weapon mount points, and the higher your rank gained through successes in combat, the more ships and weapons you'll have available to you. As space-based simulation shooters go, Starlancer is fantastic for its time and a well-deserved follow-up to Chris Roberts' earlier classics. That said, it cannot remain unmentioned that Space Combat Simulator is all that the Starlancer is, because while you have an interesting story to follow in this one, flying missions and completing combat-centric objectives is all that you'll be doing, which may be enough for some, while others may consider it a bit lacking. Starlancer's stories continued in 2003's Freelancer, which for me personally is a much better game, more complete product and simply put, time spent having much more fun. Still, for the time of its release, Starlancer was impressive, and not only in terms of its style presentation but also gameplay too. Limited or not, there was nothing like it, at least nothing modern at the time. How often is a sequel better than the original? Well, Heroes of Might and Magic, Diablo, Quake, Doom, Street Fighter, Knights of the Old Republic, I could go for a while. There's so many games proving that it's not unusual for a successor to be better. But if you think about it, like really think about it, it's not the case at all. And for every follow-up that managed to live up to expectations and surpass the original, there's 10 games that failed to do that. And yes, that's an arbitrary number and I've not counted it nor run any calculations to confirm it. It's all based on my observations and gut feeling alone. So, whenever a game manages to surpass its predecessor, it's worth noting. And Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Amn runs circles around the original game. I mean, sure, it still worked on the same, albeit updated and a bit old feeling by 2000 engine, but everything else was fantastic. Story, scope, content, everything. It's easily one of the most important video games ever made. Baldur's Gate 2 takes place shortly after the events of the first game and starts with you, my dear viewer, and your merry group of magic-wielding and sword-swinging companions in captivity. You're tied and most likely abused in one way or another. And as you awoken to this grim reality, it all dawned on you fast, especially that the mad mage going by the name of Irenicus seemed to run crazy experiments on you all day and night, seeking to gain access to your seemingly untapped power. Fortunately, two things happen. First, he doesn't realize that the power comes from cheese and your intolerance to lactose, and that it manifests itself in deadly gas. So until he feeds you pizzas, you're all fine and your secret is yours to keep. And secondly, Irenicus is distracted as the complex is attacked by shadow thieves, which gives Imoen, or as I like to call her, Imoen, enough time to appear from hiding and free you. Minsk and Jaheira are there too, and with the party unchained, on their feet, and only a little confused by this odd turn of events, you're ready to escape the underground facility and enter the city of Atkatla in Amn. And this is just the beginning of your adventure full of twists and turns that will take you on a roller coaster of discovery, learning more about yourself, Irenicus' true goal and future of the continent. You can naturally import your main character from the original at the game start or create a new one, and there are 11 classes available to pick between. Fighter, Ranger, Paladin, Thief, Bard, Mage, Cleric, Druid, Barbarian, Monk and Sorcerer. The last three are the new additions in the second game. All of them have different skills, abilities and spells where appropriate, and can wear and use different armors and weapons in accordance with the principles described in AD&D 2nd edition rule set. Your party can consist of maximum of 6 characters, and you'll meet 16 feasible candidates on your adventures, and it will be up to you to build the strongest or most fun group of them all. Each of them is driven by their own motivations and has a unique personality and character-specific side quest unrelated to the main story. Overall, Baldur's Gate 2 seems to be the case of a gamified love letter to the fans of the original, as not only everything in it was expanded by a tenfold, serving 50 to 60 hours of main story content and close to 300 if you'd like to 100% it. But also many of the pet peeves and suggestions that the fans had about the first game were fixed or modified in the second. So higher resolution was added, 3D support enabled, character kits included, considerably expanding on the possible number of builds, making the game much more replayable, and spell list is expanded, serving over 300 individual spells. Other than that, Baldur's Gate plays identical to the first one, so you see the world from a top-down isometric perspective and in real time, with an option to pause combat to issue commands to individual party members. The dialogues are richer, more branching, and picking appropriate options in them can grant access to extra quests and additional storylines. Many of the locations, important figures and myths known from Forgotten Realms lore are included in Baldur's Gate 2's campaign, and fans of the tabletop role-playing will feel in it right at home. Its huge ass, spanning over 290 quest storyline, countless combat encounters and adventures you'll have in its world truly deserve a video of its own. And they just might get one at some point. For now though, all I want you to know is that this acclaimed, multiple award-winning game that is beloved by millions world over is well worth your time and money, especially that it's dirt cheap now on numerous sales, and it's easily the best game in today's video. And I say it knowing very well what else I've prepared for today later on. MechWarrior 4 Vengeance is a first-person perspective gigantic robot combat simulator set in the Battletech universe, in which the pinnacle of all war machines are huge, heavily armed robots known as battlemechs. The established over the previous game so-called Inner Sphere, so a coalition of planets that banded together to fight the invading colonists called the clans, are not as friendly towards each other as they used to and are now largely competing, sometimes in demanding matches of rock, paper, scissors, but most often in combat. Your parents are a victim of an attack of an opposing faction on your homeworld, and its brute force takeover left you and your missing sister as the only survivors. Not only such an attack is a dick move, but also prevents you from fulfilling your all-time dream of becoming an interstellar ballet dancer. Why? Cause now you gotta man up and make the bastards responsible pay. And since dance battles are not a thing in the future, which is a pity as you'd win with ease, you join up the ranks of friendly allies to help them fight against the faction that left you an orphan. And this is where your story of revenge begins. MechWarrior 4 plays largely the same as the third did and serves you a rather linear campaign split into groups of 5 or so operations, each of them containing smaller submissions. While they differ in what is expected of you, they're all very combat-centric, and you'll do very little other than the killing baddies. So, you may be sent to blow up enemy dropships, take out enemy battlemech squadrons, or protect a convoy en route, which, as you can probably guess, naturally comes down to destroying mechs attacking it. As in previous entries in the series, a certain skill level is required to perform well, so learning all the tricks of the trade, so to speak, and how to feel comfortable piloting a giant bipedal killing machine is a must. So it's understandable that you may fail a few times before you begin performing well enough to be a true scourge in the eyes of the evil faction that you're after. The game comes with 21 different in specs, weapon mounts and size mechs, 7 of which were created for it exclusively, and offers 30 missions long campaign spread over 15 maps and countless lasers, cannons and ballistic weapons of varying powers. Is it a lot or not enough? It's hard to tell, especially for someone who's not a fan of the series. But what I do know for a fact is that fans loved it and enjoyed it and its expansions immensely, despite some of them vocalizing their disappointment in it not being as good as MechWarrior 3, whatever that may mean. If you like the earlier games in the series, this one's an obvious pick and a title you most likely won't get bored playing. But if you're like me and crave very little for big robots, especially those that feel like taller and more maneuverable tanks, other games in this video will be a better choice for you. Decades ago, evil necromancers attempted to seize control over the land of Nox, but were stopped by the legendary hero Jandor with use of an artifact known as the Staff of Oblivion. Following their defeat, Jandor trapped their souls within the magical orb, which the arch-wizard Horvath transported to another dimension that happened to be modern Earth. One of the discoveries after Necromancer's death was a female infant in their stronghold, which Jandor took and left in the care of an ogre village. A rather questionable choice if you ask me, but perhaps these ogres are different than the ones that I'm used to. He then disassembled the staff and left pieces of it with all 3 of Nox's main factions to protect: the Fire Knights of the Fortress Dunmere, the Wizards of Caster Galava, and the Conjurers of Temple of Ix. The game starts with the girl coming of age, rediscovering her dark magical roots and proclaiming herself the Queen of Necromancers. She summons the orb back to Earth to increase her power, but as she does that, she also teleports Jack Maurer, an owner of the orb from Earth, who thought that it was nothing more than a fancy fireplace mantle decoration. This is where the game starts, where you have to pick your class and, depending on that choice, start in a different part of Nox. Playing as Jack, you're the only one capable and brave enough to stop the evil Queen of Necromancers. Nox is an isometric perspective action role-playing with fast-paced action-oriented combat very similar to Diablo. Its story is rather linear and sees you spending most of your time in the dungeons and wilderness, fighting monsters, gathering experience, collecting items such as weapons, armor and spells for use or sale. Single-player campaign takes you through a series of interestingly designed and climatic locations, and the game uses a very novel at the time, at least in the genre, fog of war. It keeps areas outside of your character's line of sight covered in shadows, so to keep you on your toes and add a lot to the atmosphere of gameplay. In a way, it works like a dynamic lighting system. There are 3 classes that you can play as: the fighter, who is physically strong but can only use melee weapons and has very few combat abilities, the conjurer, who fights with a bow and can summon monsters to help him in combat and slash or tank for him, and finally the wizard, who cannot equip or use most weapons, but has access to many deadly spells. And each of these classes not only starts the game in a different location, but also experiences a different story with unique dialogues, locations and enemies. Even the ending is unique for each of them, which is not something that we saw often in 2000. Interestingly enough, Nox came on 2 CDs, second of which did not contain any files required for you to install or play, but was instead a note from the developers towards gamers containing all the files needed for multiplayer, so that you could give it to a friend and you'll be able to play Nox online together, or against each other, as randomized co-op multiplayer actually came with download-only add-on Nox Quest a bit later on. While Nox may not be the best looking, playing or story-wise action RPG today, in the year 2000 it was probably the only one that could realistically give Diablo II the run for its money. So, if you're at all into the genre, do yourself a favor and check it out, cause it's fun even today. Dark Reign 2 is what my boss's wife has over our office, with a difference that it's spelled T-O-O. My boss's reign may be dark, but hers is too, just much darker. Hence the Dark Reign 2. Though it has to be said that he can be a difficult, stubborn person to deal with at times, more often than not he's holding his nerves on a leash and controls what and to whom he says. She, however, the demonic monster that she is, the devil spawn, has no boundaries and spreads her evil everywhere, without any care or thought given to whom she talks to and what she says. She once told a gentleman who came to us asking for a job as a truck driver after he revealed to have cancer that he should stop his chemotherapy and radiotherapy, not take any medication or even consider a potential surgery, cause they don't work. Then she proceeded to tell him that we're the creatures of light, yep, I shit you not, light, and if he wanted to get better, he should just think hard about getting better and that it would happen, supposedly because of that light. That's how great of a person, creature she is. Anyway, Dark Reign 2, other than the heartless abomination, is also a 3D real-time strategy and a prequel to 1997's first Dark Reign, and it focuses on what came before the Great Conflict in that first game. There are 2 factions, JDA, Sojovian Detention Authority, which later morphed into Imperium faction in first Dark Reign, and Sprawlers that became the Freedom Guard. The world in the 26th century is not a great place to live. On one hand, the JDA established large dome cities to protect the population from harsh conditions outside, but on another, they keep the citizens in line with an iron hand, an omnipresent and relentlessly executed authority. There are no freedoms in the cities, it's JDA's way or the highway. The Sprawlers are humans that were left behind, those who refused to obey the JDA's strict rules and freedomless plan for the society. So in a way, it's a game about despotic government and its conflict with freedom-supporting rebels. In fact, the game comes with 2 campaigns, one for each side, and each of them tells the same story from 2 opposing points of view. In JDA campaign you play as a member of Strike Force, guided by the JDA's governing AI SIGNet, and in the Sprawlers one, you're Sirdar, a new member of the Council, eager to prove his worth and fight for the cause. The 3 pillars of RTS of resource collection, base management and combat are present and work quite well in Dark Reign 2. The resource that you're after is called Talon, and it has to be collected and moved to the refinery, where it is converted into money that can be spent on units and structures. Dark Reign 2 is definitely not the best RTS out there, not even close really, and some would argue that even the original, 3 years older first game was better, but that's debatable. What's not though is that it released in a time when it had many competitors, and while most of them did not make the risky move into 3D, majority of them were as good, if not better. So, if you're a fan of the genre, then don't skip it, but if you're someone who's looking to have their first dab at the RTS, better try something else, like a released a year earlier Age of Empires 2, or another game that I tackle a bit later in this video for instance. Both are better. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but I've not played Final Fantasy VIII. It's hard to tell why I didn't, as I was in high school back then and had all the time in the world, but I didn't. And having not played the 7th and arguably more famous entry, I had no craving for the experience at all. Especially that I managed to long forget about the earlier ones and how much fun they were. Still, it had to be said here so that you know that while I do own it now, probably more than one copy in fact, I've yet to experience it if I ever get enough time. So all that I will tell you about it will be based on what I know from numerous reviews and videos covering the subject, and naturally, some subtleties may not be present in this short review. If you happen to feel that you know more about the game than I do, it's probably because that's precisely the case. Anyway, Final Fantasy VIII is a turn-based role-playing in Square Enix's own ATB, so Active Time Battle variety, well known for the fans of the series, set on an unnamed fantasy world and featuring some science fiction elements. It is following its direct predecessor in terms of graphical design, so using 3D graphics overlaid on top of static pre-rendered backgrounds, albeit with some notable differences, most prominent of them being character models, which are realistically proportioned in Final Fantasy VIII, as opposed to more cartoon-like in the earlier entries. Additionally, for the first time in the series, characters have no defined classes or jobs and can be customized with magic spells drawn from the enemies in battles. Spells don't use MP points this time either and are expendable items. Each character can have up to 32 different ones in stacks of maximum 100 pieces. They can be equipped too to act like the armor, offering resistances to various kinds of magic or magical effects. Final Fantasy VIII's battle system is centered around monster summons called Guardian Forces, which can be assigned to particular characters. They grant additional battle commands to those that they're assigned to and are in fact where you assign spells to get those aforementioned armor bonuses. There are no randomized or collectible weapons in the game, and each character has their own special unique weapon that can be upgraded along your adventure. Limit breaks that are very powerful offensive and support abilities that the characters have work a bit different too, unlocking only when the characters are at low HP. In Final Fantasy VII, they did when the characters sustained a certain, rather high amount of damage, which does not always necessarily mean them having low HP at a particular time. And lastly, the experience required to level up in Final Fantasy VIII is set at a flat 1000 points between all the levels and never changes. And the regular enemies scale to the player's level to keep the game challenging, while bosses have level caps not to become too demanding. I dislike level scaling enemies with a passion of an arrowless bowman, as I consider this type of design to be lazy and artificially raising the difficulty, never letting the player to feel like they've achieved something noteworthy. Anyway, Final Fantasy follows Squall Leonhardt, a young man in training to become a member of SEED, a mercenary organization. On the eve of his graduation, however, the city of Dole on the continent Balamp, where his school is located, is attacked by the Galbadia forces, and the teachers decide to use it as the students' final exam. So, Squall, along with Cypher and Zell, are sent to help fight the Galbadia raid. Mid-mission, however, Selphie replaces Cypher after he disobeyed direct orders and abandoned his team. With help of Squall and his friends, though that F-word at this point of the story may be too inflated and inaccurate, Galbadian advance is halted and repelled. Squall and his, well, let's call them companions, graduate and become full-fledged members of SEED. A little later after graduation party, during which Squall meets Rinoa, his future love interest, our protagonist is assigned along with Zell and Selphie to help Rinoa's resistance in Galbadian-occupied Timber. I know, all those names sound ridiculous, but that's JRPG for you. Anyway, during his time on the mission, Squall learns that Sorcerer's Idea is behind Galbadia's recent hostilities and that she took Cypher, a former SEED student, under her wing, to become her second-in-command. And this is the beginning of a long-ass adventure full of twists and turns, betrayals and flashbacks telling this epic story that will no doubt provide you with hours of fun. And you know what? The more I read on it, the more I wanna play it too. Crazy naming, weird gameplay elements aside, but those JRPGs tend to have amazing stories worth following and seeing through to their very end. So, I'm adding Final Fantasy VIII to my to-play in the future wishlist, and as soon as my lottery win comes through, which should be any day now, and I don't have to work anymore, I'll be going through the titles on that list one by one. Earth 2150 is a 3D real-time strategy and a follow-up to earlier Earth 2140. 22nd century was not a great time for Earth. The conflict between largely civilized and prosperous United Civilized States, an imperialistic and despotic Eurasian dynasty, and especially a huge atomic attack using a new and unsanctioned weapons of the latter on the earlier, left the planet in shambles and slightly pushed out of its regular orbit, slowly but steadily moving towards the Sun. So the third faction, going by the name of Lunar Corporation and occupying Moon, joins the war in an attempt to defeat or reconcile two fighting giants to save humanity. As it turns out, however, it is too late for the planet, and it is literally the humanity that needs saving now, as its home is already doomed. So, the objective of the entire game, other than your typical gather resources, build bases and units to fight other trifecta of tasks, is to collect and gather plenty enough resources to build an evacuation ship, allowing a faction to travel to Mars and escape the impending apocalypse. Funny enough, the successor to Earth 2150, so 2160, I know, really creative naming, takes place on Mars and assumes that all three factions somehow, and against all odds, manage to send their own arcs. Anyway, the UCS is a highly advanced site utilizing robots for everything, military included, and using modern technology such as shadow generators, plasma cannons, and anti-gravity propulsion systems. Eurasian Dynasty sacrificed progress for conflict and changed very little from its late 21st century inception, and still uses tanks, helicopters, and other obsolete units for warmongering. But they have plenty of them, and strength lies in numbers too. Lunar Corporation is the most advanced technologically out of all three sites, utilizing solar power for its energy needs and using anti-gravity vehicles, electro-cannons and sonic weapons for combat, and the only one that does not in fact build structures for the bases, but transports them directly from the moon. Their units are fast and advanced, but rather fragile. Earth 2150's campaign is composed out of 70 non-linear missions and features few interesting and often new takes on the genre. First of all, it doesn't allow you to infinitely mass-build units and create a gigantic armies, as production costs increase, and at some point it becomes more feasible to repair those that you already have and that are more experienced than pay ungodly amounts of money for the new ones. Additionally, constant technological progress and unique to all factions upgrades make those units last you a long while, never feeling outdated or useless. Well, provided that you keep them repaired and retrofitted, that is. And since we're on the units, there's tons of them for all, land, air and the sea, and many of them have special abilities, like digging tunnels through mountains, considerably shortening the distance of movement on some maps for instance. The engine powering it all is rather good too, offering beautiful graphics and many realistic weather effects like rain, fog, thunderstorm and the likes. And a day and night cycle, which actually uses units and building slides as you'd expect them to in real life. Out of two 3D RTS games in today's video, Earth 2150 is easily a better one and one of the more interesting titles to come out in and around the year 2000. So if you're into the genre, do not sleep on it, it's a gem. Jeff Cramon's Grand Prix 3 is as good, if not better F1 simulation as his previous games were. It is based on the 1998 season and features all the tracks, teams and drivers. Well, truth be told, Jacques Villeneuve, whose name I've no doubt mispronounced here beyond recognition, is not included and replaced by a fictional driver, John Newhouse. Why? I've no clue, but it is what it is. While GP3 is a simulation, its entry level is not discouragingly high and new players to the genre can just hop in and start playing. Sure, they may not win straight away and for a long while even, at least until they learn all the good habits and abandon the bad that they've no doubt acquired, playing countless arcade racers. But if you really want a challenge, you can just turn off all the driving aids and jump into proverbial deep water. There are 3 game modes of practice, single race and the main fare of the game, full championship. Not only all the tracks look and feel as close to real life as they've ever been, but also driving physics is spot on, making Grand Prix 3 a must-play. Naturally, as much as we'd like to, wins do not only come to better drivers, but also to those whose cars are performing more adequately to the track conditions. So the car setup is as deep and thorough as it's always been, allowing you to adjust wing setting, brake balances, G ratios, puckers, dampers and even the ride height among others. And while it may be a bit overwhelming initially, especially to someone who has no idea what half of these are, so me for instance, after a while, whether you want to or not, you'll need to double in car setup at least a little. The manual does a great job explaining it all, but if you have no access to it, there are YouTube videos covering the subject quite well too. Now, a lot can be said about Grand Prix 3 and it's mostly great stuff, but there's one negative I have to mention. The engine that it uses is the same that powered Grand Prix 2, and while it's modified and little expanded, you can tell that it's few years old by then base and not a freshly cooked one, at least when comparing it to something like F1 2000 that released the same year. It doesn't change the fact that Grand Prix 3 is an amazing game and really fun simulator, provided that you're into the sport that is, but it would be nice to have it run on a new and time-adequate tech. American McGee's Alice is a third-person view action-adventure 3D platformer. Things have changed a lot since Alice originally found her way into the Wonderland. She was orphaned by an accidental fire, losing both parents, and after many attempts at her own life, she was institutionalized and remains in catatonic state, wasting away with each passing day. And since Wonderland is connected to Alice in more than one way, it too corrupted beyond recognition. The Red Queen has turned malevolent, Cardguard keeps imprisoning people, the Mad Hatter went truly crazy with curiosity for clockworks, and overall, the Wonderland is more like Nightmareland now. Trademark painting. Broken or not, guilt doesn't let Alice stand aside and do nothing, especially that saving Wonderland may be the only way for her to restore her peace of mind and save herself. Pretty dark, isn't it? Well, Wonderland has been twisted, turned into a Barton-esque version of itself, dark, grim and truly demented version of Alice's psyche. Alice's gameplay is more centered around action than adventuring, so you use different kinds of weapons, here funny enough called toys, most with primary and secondary attacks, with that second being stronger but also depleting your will, so game's equivalent of mana. Fortunately, it can be replenished by collecting life essence from defeated enemies. And these weapons are really imaginative stuff, so Vorpal Knife, piercing playing cards, flame-throwing Jack-in-the-Box and Demon Dice among others. Imagine how fun they are. The enemies are rather varied and in tune with the books, albeit with game's twisted moody vibe added to them. So you'll battle with miniature Jabberwockies, Snarks, lava monsters or rogue chessmen among others. They're all visually striking, same way the rest of the game is, and Alice is just a treat for the eyes all the way through. There are bosses in the game too, and they're really challenging, much more than in other similar games. And for the most part, they simply require having their asses well whooped, rather than figuring out complicated mechanics to beat them. The Wonderland, changed or not, is still an enchanting place to visit, full of vines to swing on, ledges to hang from, and tons upon tons of jumping puzzles. Like way more than you'd ever thought necessary. So it goes without saying that American McGee's Alice is a true work of art in terms of its presentation. The world, the enemies and even the goth version of Alice, all of that looks stunning and very, very atmospheric, making the whole fair a pleasure to go through, even if it's largely a linear adventure with pretty repetitive gameplay loop and a bit too many jumping puzzles for my liking. I adored Alice when I first played it. It was a visual and often unpredictable in its design experience like no other at the time, and if there was one thing that I'd like to change in it for it to become even better, more iconic title, I'd like the story to be more fleshed out throughout the adventure, as at times it felt as merely a jump-off point, with not enough substance added along the way. It's still a recommendation, even if Alice's perverted version of Wonderland is definitely not for everyone. Delta Force Land Warrior is a sequel to Delta Force 2 and a first-person shooter developed to simulate US infantry soldiers, along with advanced combat tactics and equipment used by them on series of over 24 realistic missions/assignments. At the time of its release, Land Warrior was as realistic as it was possible to achieve on PC, so all weapons are carbon copies of these used by US Army, the ammo is heavily limited, and the game favors accurate shooting rather than going through all the max in just a couple of short bursts. You can pick up weapons from downed enemies and use them too, and best of all, no one, not a single enemy or even you for that matter, are a bullet sponge. And one, at most 2 hits, and it's bye-bye, for the buddies and you alike. Now, all this may make Land Warrior feel rather demanding at first, and even more so in the heat of the moment when being surrounded or approached by a group of enemies. At least until you realize that it's not a typical FPS at all. You're not expected to run in headfirst and engage all groups of enemies one after another. It's not one of those games at all. What you are supposed to do is prepare. Observe the mission area, examine your objectives, think of all the ways that you can achieve them, plan the route you'd like to take in and out, if possible using the element of surprise, and don't rush. Slower is faster. And also, if you can take a sniper rifle with you and use it, then take that goddamn sniper rifle and do use it. Picking enemies off from a mile away, with them not knowing where the shot came from even, and no visible target to focus their fire on, is a godsend. In fact, I'd risk saying that using the sniper rifle turns this otherwise rather demanding game into one easier than expected. And you know what? It's probably what the devs intended for, as that's how it would be in real life. Distance, after all, not only gives you a feeling of security, but that aforementioned element of surprise too. Anyway, if you decide to skip the sniper rifle for whatever demented reason or can't use it, then stealth and sneaking is the king. Slow, methodic approach and patience. So, if any of what I just said sounds interesting to you, don't skip it, it may not look great today, but it's as playable as it's always been. Oh, I should mention too that Land Warrior featured a multiplayer mode with up to 48 of you running around shooting each other, but finding the right server was never easy as there were plenty of cheaters using the hill sniping glitch, where they could stay hidden behind a hill and glitch shoot through it from a place of complete safety. Some would say it's game designers' fault for leaving such an exploit in, and it's partly correct, but I also think that it's a choice a particular player decides to make to break the game and make it not fun for everyone else. Infestation is a futuristic sci-fi vehicular action shooter. In the year 2237, humanity has spread all around the galaxy, and using a network of warp gates, allowing for faster-than-light travel, colonized numerous habitable planets. As much as we're prospering, conquering the unknown and bending the planets to our needs, I think the word here is terraforming, we're also loud. I mean, I know that sound does not travel in vacuum of space, but it's not the sound that we were loud with, but change. We were loud with change, and soon enough, someone picked up on it. Now, aliens can be peaceful or they can be aggressive, and if they were peace-loving kind here, you know, the ETs of the future, we'd not have this game, so you can guess which of them started pouring out of the warp gates in response to our actions and laying destruction to our colonies. And since the colonies were spread apart and definitely not ready to face a full head-on attack, you, my dear viewer, being the universal hero with both skills and experience to pull it off, are given a prototype morphing vehicle and are sent into the heart of the alien invasion to stop it. Infestation is chock full of action. I mean, from the first mission to the last, you will be constantly driving around alien-looking planets and blowing stuff up, usually both at once, and completing a variety of mission objectives. These are truly aplenty and varied, and anything from busting out POWs from alien prisons, through destroying force field generators and unlocking new areas to conquer, to running away from a volcanic planet about to be wiped out by a gigantic eruption. You won't get bored playing Infestation is what I'm saying here. Your vehicle can transform into numerous different forms unlocked throughout the campaign, so while you start with an armed, fast and nimble basic buggy, soon enough you'll get access to other, more exciting ones like super fast skimmer, Bigfoot that can drive over water, or flying heli-jet among others. And picking the right one for the challenge ahead can make it considerably easier. There's also tons of weapons and other upgrades in the game, but it won't take you long to find your faves while trying them out, and you'll only swap them out when particular enemies respond better to a certain kind of damage. Though it has to be said here that plasma cannons are the right call for the most that you will encounter. Perhaps not all, but it's a very versatile weapon and one that should serve you well throughout most of the adventure. In some missions you can control or capture factories, and these are used to manufacture all of the upgrades, be it in terms of armament or new transformation modes for your vehicle. Having this made, however, requires spending red, green and blue crystals that can be occasionally found around the game world, usually close to mines. To manufacture anything you'll need to have plans for it, and these can be acquired by dropping pieces of technologies near scientists and then by picking them up if a little light bulb appears over them after they got access to that particular tech. But upgrades aside, the main part of the game is naturally action, and it will take you to many corners of the universe and you'll be freely able to travel between them using the warp gates. It's worth noting that you can only save the game at these warp gates, so chances are you'll fly through them more than you'll realistically need to. The enemies will come in many shapes and forms, and most importantly in large numbers, so you'll have your hands full in no time. Or your cannons red hot, you know, potato, potato, tomato, tomato, alien, green man, whatever. Infestation is definitely not the best 3D arcade shooter out there, probably not even of 2000, but it's no doubt a fun one and you won't get bored playing it. Elastomania, despite looking like something that spawned at the tail end of 1993, is probably one of the most important releases of 2000. Well, to me personally at least. Mainly because I used to play it with a good friend of mine back then, alternating and switching only when a particular level was completed or if one of us failed. He's sadly no longer with us, but I still consider it a fun memory. Anyway, Elastomania is a sequel to Action Supercross and, for the lack of a better description, a vehicular side-view arcade puzzler. And one that's more unique and weird than most we've talked about today. You're on this cross bike and have to complete increasingly more demanding stages by collecting all the apples in them and then getting to the exit in the form of a flower. I know, sounds hella stupid, and it looks and sounds rather dated too, but don't let the presentation or its oddities fool you, it's low-key the best non-story game in today's entire video, and one of the best for the entire year. The bike is a subject to a rather well done, even if heavily oversimplified physics engine, so you can perform various tricks, daredevil-worthy jumps or hangs, and everything that you can imagine to do with your bike is a loud and fair game, provided you can do it. and regardless of how crazy it looks, for as long as your character himself doesn't touch the ground. Now, I wouldn't call Elastomania's physics true to life, but they're sitting somewhere in an ideal midpoint between realism and fun, making it devilishly addictive and fun to go through. You can skip up to 5 levels if they happen to be too demanding at the time, and the only way to replenish the skips is to come back to them and complete them. It's a fair model, I feel, and one I would like to see in more puzzle games. Just letting you ignore the stages you can beat to carry on playing, with a chance of coming back to them later on to fix your former mistakes. The best thing about the game, however, are the levels. While they start easy, letting you familiarize yourself with all the controls and get dragged into this hella fun game, they get more demanding fast, but never too difficult to be considered annoying. And if you go through them one after another, you should be able to work out how to beat most puzzles in just a few tries. And those that you want, you can always come back to. The levels are super fun designed, utilizing many jumps, hangs and tricks for completion, and the sooner you master all of these, especially the upside down one wheel hang, the better you will do. Some levels have spikes too, which are obviously an instant kill, so should be avoided, but other than that and the layout of the stages, there are no other enemies or obstacles in the game at all. Shower version comes with 10 levels only, and it's the first 10 too, so while not very demanding, they're a good taster to what's to come in the full version, which is composed out of 50 of these and comes with a built-in editor. Either way, deceptively bad looking and terrible sounding Elastomania is probably the most fun you'll have all week. Warlords Battlecry is a real-time sequel to the turn-based fantasy strategy series Warlords that no one thought that they wanted, and nearly everyone who tried it loved it. It's a surprise on many levels and a game definitely worth a mention, if not a full review. Now, once again, so that we're clear, I am not a fan of the RTS genre, so my personal experience with it is very limited, but I'll try to tell you as much as I know about it, supplemented with all the info that I found on it online. Two magical tears fell from the heavens, red and white, Dusiphius and Navarre respectively, red capable of bringing death and destruction to the world, and white offering life and healing. They're the most powerful artifacts that the world had ever seen, and whomever claims them will be a force to be reckoned with. And while some may want to use them for good, some are not all. So humans, dwarves, barbarians, minotaurs, all kinds of elves, wood, high, dark and closet elves, with closet ones being those magical creatures that live in your closets and always hide your favorite t-shirts and steal your socks. And naturally, the undead, all want the tears, and they will stop at nothing to get them. Warlords Battlecry is one of the last 2D RTSs from the genre's golden era, and an excellent game in its own right. It features a large story-based campaign split into 6 chapters, 12 different victory conditions, and offering 8 factions to pick between, heroes with upgradable skills, hundreds of different units and countless maps to play on. And it's worth pointing out that the factions are not just the reskins of one another, and all of them play in their own way, have their unique to them strengths and weaknesses. Heroes retain their stats and skills between the missions and can even carry their most experienced units with them. And managing them is truly a balancing act, as you need to use them in battles for them to grow and progress, while in the same time make sure to protect them, because they represent you in the world of Warlords. So, if they die, it's game over. In fact, while being an RTS through and through, Battlecry feels a lot like light RPG too. Even more so because heroes can also go on quests, and if they manage to complete them, they will be rewarded with either strong allies or magical items. It may seem like a waste of time to quest in an RTS, even more so in one where there's so much stuff to manage, but the rewards are definitely worth it. So, if you manage to find a minute, definitely consider questing. There are 4 resources in the game: gold, metal, stone and crystal, and they are used for all, buildings and units. If I was to compare Battlecry to any other RTS, I'd say it plays the most like Age of Empires, adding its own unique races and twists to it, so stuff like heroes, magic, quests and multiple endings. It's perhaps not the best game in the genre, but it was easily one of the best for the year. The operative No One Lives Forever is a third-person shooter set in 1960s, in which you play as foxy former thief, now sexy secret agent in training, Kate Archer, working for the Unity, a worldwide secret espionage agency. As the evil organization known only as Harm, Harm, removes your fellow agents from this plane of existence one by one, you are finally given a chance to shine. I mean to head off on a field mission, cause you're you, so you've always been shining. And also, while the circumstances are not the best perhaps, you really don't look a gift mission in its objectives, or however that saying went. Anyway, you are given a very simple in its main task mission of tracking down and investigating of harm activities to find out why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and to stop it, which will take you around the world and quickly evolve into a much more complicated, Hollywood-like plot resembling a James Bond movie spoof. So you'll be put in numerous humorous situations in which you'll need to perform very agent-like activities. So sniping, stealing, scuba diving around sunken ships, assassinations, free-falling out of an airplane while fighting off enemies mid-air, sneaking, in fact a lot of sneaking, mostly sneaking when I think of it, then some shooting, because an agent has to shoot, or explode things from time to time, that is usually then followed by a daring escape or even more sneaking, sometimes both. A little bit of loving, every agent deserves a little romance after all, though that one's not a given, and I may be imagining things. But you know what is a given? Yes, you got it right, sneaking, and you'll do much more of it. Well, truth be told, while the focus is placed on it and the game is designed in a way that promotes quiet and stealthy approach, you can theoretically try to go through most of it guns blazing, jumping into action head on. It's not advisable and often makes it a much more difficult fare, but it's possible. So, No One Lives Forever is at heart a stealth shooter with all of its levels designed around that premise. It rewards extra points for staying out of enemy's sight and arms you with numerous gadgets that will help you to do so efficiently. So stuff like body remover powder, cigarette lighter welder, lipstick explosives, lockpicking barrette, or photographic sunglasses among others. The attention to detail and love for gaming is more than prominent in No One Lives Forever in each and every section of it, no less. The missions are fun, but also very creatively designed, with some of them, I shit you not, being some of the best that I've ever played in FPS to date, and everything that the game is built out of is great here. The enemy AI is also something noteworthy, as they will react to you and your actions in an active manner, running for cover, flipping tables, grouping up, or trying to surround you. They will even change weapons depending on the distance, and they won't stop looking for you when they take a peek at you somewhere first. So they don't just magically ignore you killing some of their friends and return to their patrol routes after 5 minutes of searching like they would in many other games. The alarms don't stop, and if the enemies know that you're there, they will look for you continuously. So, it's clear that the gameplay is the highlight of it all, but I wouldn't like you to ignore the omnipresent humor either, as No One Lives Forever is overflowing with it. The conversations you eavesdrop on, the situations and twists you get involved in, and the movie-like long cutscenes, all of it will have you laughing all throughout. No One Lives Forever is easily not only one of the best games of the year, but dare I say it, one of the best shooters ever made. Talking about some of the best and most important games ever, Metal Gear Solid. One of the most cinematic experiences of the late 90s and early 2000s. It is literally an action-adventure spy movie in which you can take an active part and actually be the hero to save the day. It's a third-person top-down stealth action game, and one that you'll most likely either fall in love with or completely ignore. I somehow managed to land somewhere in the middle there, as I did played it and loved it, albeit on PC and not original PlayStation release, but I've never completed it. I can't tell you why today because I don't remember, but I suppose it must have had something to do with some other game releasing at this similar time. Maybe Diablo II, maybe Heroes of Might and Magic 3 Complete, or maybe something else. Point is, I've not reached the ending myself, and it's one of the few video gaming regrets that I have. Anyway, you play as a secret agent / super soldier codenamed Solid Snake, a legend in the field, a legend of the field too, and I heard that a legend in bed too, though that last may have not aged well since the year 2000. I mean, we have different colored pills today, red, green, blue, so perhaps it's still accurate. Point is, I'm not the one to check. The story sets up with TERRORISTS seizing a nuclear disposal site in Alaska, and you're called in to deal with it. As the plot progresses, however, numerous twists and turns happen, and while it initially seemed like a potential disaster in the making, with so many layers and threads to it making it difficult to follow, very soon it begins unveiling into a very involving, captivating and well-written tale that could have easily been made into a movie. As every time when you feel that you know what to expect and what's about to happen, something else does, keeping you on your toes all throughout it. As much as the story is fantastic, even if I only highlighted it here superficially, and that's by choice no less, not to spoil it too much for you, the true star of the show is the gameplay, which for its time was something else. Metal Gear Solid took things other games did before, put them all together, and polished them so hard that they became so shiny that you could see them from the International Space Station. Hardly any game at the time in a similar action-adventure genre could compare to Metal Gear Solid in playability. In short, it's a sneaker. as in a game where you sneak around, infiltrate the enemy complex and perform tons upon tons of stealth kills and not a shoo. I'm definitely not talking about shoo. So, instead of running into enemies guns blazing, you're moving about stealthily, going for the slowest fast approach and avoiding guards where possible. If any of them spots you at any time, the game enters so-called alert mode, in which they attack you on sight and call for backup. What's more, all cameras, turrets and guards in the alert mode keep searching for you actively rather than just following their pre-assigned patrol routes. The whole stealth this, stealth that talk here doesn't mean that you can't kill in Metal Gear Solid, it's plenty enough that you can't do it in real life, so from time to time, when a particular section cannot be completed in hiding, you will have to dispose of the enemies, preferably in a fast and quiet manner. So snapping their necks from behind or by using silenced pistol is the way to go. I mean, there are regular guns, rifles and tons of explosives for different occasions available at your disposal too, but I'd consider them the last resort and not the default go-to. What Metal Gear Solid is best known for though, are the things you can do to hide or redirect guards' attention to other areas. So you can knock on the walls to have them move there, or you can hide in/under cardboard boxes and many more. While most enemies are simple guards, you do have to tackle a more difficult boss enemy every now and then too, and these are extremely fun to fight with. And best of all are unique and defeated in a different way, applying different weapons and tactics. It's a blast, both literally and figuratively speaking. Well, Raven shows up twice through your adventure, but each of those fights is completely different, so he's not really an exception. PC version of Metal Gear Solid is virtually identical to PlayStation original with a few very notable changes. First of all, it includes a high resolution and high color support, so the game looks incomparably better than it ever could on Sony's system. Secondly, it comes with the first person mode, which is hella useful, especially in those places where default camera used to act a bit odd. And finally, additional VR missions, which may seem like just a training add-on to the entire game, while in fact if you give them a little time, you'll quickly realize that there's so much more, and as good as the main game is, well, short of the story. So, it goes without saying that I wholeheartedly recommend trying Metal Gear Solid out if you never had a chance. And if you did, then you just probably sat there munching on something and nodding your head while I was talking. Perhaps bacon. Why am I even talking about bacon? I must be losing it. Anyway, back to our scheduled programming. Panzer General III Scorched Earth is the fourth mainline entry in the turn-based historical wargame series and arguably the best of them all, or as good as the first one was if you're someone who believes the original was the finest of the first three. The biggest change between it and earlier ones is that it focuses entirely on the Eastern Front, which is great, because it was technically speaking the biggest of all fronts during World War II, and oddly, usually overlooked or ignored by movies and games. Hard to tell why, but I'd bet on tundra and snow not being very attractive, both visually and in terms of temperatures. Anyway, you'll take part in battles of Moscow, Stalingrad, Warsaw, Berlin and some smaller ones too, covering the entire Eastern Front campaign. In fact, there are 4 campaigns included, 2 for each Germans and Russians, and each can run between few and just under 20 individual battles depending on how you're doing them. Given that the campaigns are branching in Panzer General III, the game is much more replayable than the earlier ones were. The addition of the campaign editor is also new, and it comes with tons of available maps and plenty of settings. Most interesting of them being ability to add British and American sides to the conflict despite them not taking part in the built-in campaign. So it's definitely something that helps Panzer General III stay fresh for longer. Other than that, not much has changed mechanically from Panzer General 3D, so it's still leaders gaining XP and not units, and they can provide huge bonuses to those that they are assigned to and also reassign when necessary, though that comes at the penalty. These leaders have few different stats that they're described with, and most important of them all has got to be the promotion rating. Which sounds complicated, but if you reduce it down to its basic function, all it really correlates to is how many actions their unit will be able to take in combat. They also receive medals, which offer them, well, let's call them powers or abilities. Yeah, abilities sounds better, and these are special actions and passive upgrades to units. Clearly, they are the most important part of any well-working army, kinda like they tend to be in real life. Same as its predecessor, Panzer General III used line-of-sight mechanics, which means that all kinds of traps and ambushes are possible, only depending on the craftiness of an army leader. So, you, my dear viewer. There are a few different mission types in the game, so anything from occupation and holding of a particular location on the map, through destruction of specific enemy units, all the way to having to move your units to an exit hex. But the biggest variety in it all is naturally served by the enemy forces unit composition and maps. All in all, Panzer General III is the most polished and well thought out entry ever since the first game, and definitely worth time of any and all wargame lovers. Sudden Strike is a World War II real-time strategy wargame like no other, and an excellent contrast to Panzer General III that we've just spoken about. Like exactly opposite to it in its design and forfeiting the RTS genre base building and management element entirely. It focuses on realism of combat and brings set combat into the forefront of gameplay, letting us focus on strategy and tactics of different battles and operations instead of micromanagement, which in a real-time game following real history events is really unnecessary. Sudden Strike is composed out of numerous campaigns for both sides of the conflict, allies and axis, and serves them in a succeeding mission format, with each of them having their own particular objectives. What's interesting, some of the missions are not putting you in a position of more or less equal power when facing the enemy, and you have to complete them smart rather than by diving headfirst all in. I don't want you to think though that the conflict has been minimized to micro-skirmishes and guerrilla warfare, as there are over 100 different units in the game, and some combat encounters can have up to 1000 of these involved at once, so as many as real-world battles had back then. What's more, all these units are painstakingly recreated to be as authentic as possible, so they are appropriately resistant to damage, cause as much of it as they would in real life, and require resupply and repairs. Oh, and basically anything you see on the map, from the smallest trees all the way to the biggest buildings, is destructible. Some things entirely, some to a certain degree, but it all adds a lot to the realism and most importantly fun of gameplay, which in itself is also very action-packed, at least for an RTS, and you'll hardly ever feel as if you're waiting for something to build or trade, like you would in other games in the genre, and you always keep doing something. Be it scouting new parts of the map, going for the mission objectives, fighting on few fronts, or quote-unquote cleaning up a path with your stronger units for those susceptible to damage. You know, an escort type of a mission. There's so much to do in Sudden Strike you wouldn't believe, and it's one of the very few RTSs that I actually can imagine myself really getting into, as it abandons that whole resource gathering, base building and unit farming trifecta, which I find rather tiresome. Anyway, use of active pose and waypoints is also a fun addition, especially for someone like myself, as it doesn't change the game's overall RTS theme at all, while catering to gamers who like to take things slower, strategize and plan out moves of all units under their control down to a singular order or waypoints in their movement. It's like a World War II version of Baldur's Gate, short of quests and storyline. Your units can naturally capture enemy machine guns, mortars and even artillery, and it all adds a lot to the fun factor. Sudden Strike's presentation, in terms of both sounds and graphics, is fantastic, and I really appreciated sticking to 2D rather than going for what most other games did in 2000, so forcing 3D into everything just because it looks good in big, large, shiny lettering on a game box as a feature. Sticking to the older, but more polished and detailed kind of a presentation allowed Sudden Strike to be overflowing with tons of tiny details and charm that simplistic by 2000 3D couldn't really handle at that fidelity. Following on the theme of unusual RTSs, Majesty the Fantasy Kingdom Sim is just that, a real-time fantasy kingdom simulator, and for all intents and purposes it could be considered a reverse tabletop RPG with some management mixed in. What? How? Why? You may wonder? Well, let me explain from the very beginning. Majesty places you in a comfy, fluffy and warm shoes of the new king of a fantasy kingdom of Ardenia, who aims to reclaim and reunite the kingdom, freeing it from all the monsters and evildoers. The thing is, neither of them wants to give away their claimed lands without a fight. So you need to convince them that your rule is the best rule, preferably with the use of sword and a shield, sometimes with a couple of high-velocity accurately placed arrows and sometimes with a fiery spell. You know, like all great rulers do. So, to simplify it, you do it by sending your heroes to deal with them. What's unique about Majesty, however, is that you don't issue orders to any of the units directly. You're a king after all, and not a general or any other simpleton leading unit, so you do not mix with your subordinates. What you can do to nudge, nay, to attract the heroes' attention to particular areas of the map or enemies, is place bounties, so rewards that will motivate them to try to deal with the problem at their location. Majesty's control scheme is a very unique concept and one oddly similar to Sims, as outside of these bounties the heroes can do whatever they please, and they do whatever they please, going about their own business and doing their own thing. Since we're on the heroes, however, there are naturally different kinds of them, from gnomes and warriors through rogues to paladins and wizards, among others. And all of them are unique, have their own personalities, skills and levels. Naturally, successful combat encounters allow heroes to level up, progress and get better, and as an extension of that, more useful. So while you don't control them per se, it's good to nurture them on the easier tasks first, to let them bulk up, before sending them to challenge more difficult tasks. The only resource in the game is gold, and everything is built with it. You don't mine for it though, but acquire it through tax collectors patrolling your kingdom's buildings, through heroes as purchases, cause yeah, they make those, after all they do control themselves without any input on your side, and through the treasure chests found on the map. In essence, Majesty is a huge balancing act and nothing more. You must balance what building constructions you spend gold on, set up manageable henchman limits and levels of the established bounty rewards. So, you must keep the kingdom afloat and expanding, all the while making sure that it's safe for the citizens and that the heroes keep getting better and better. And heroes are your most important, well, let's call them resource, nay, asset, because while the henchmen recruit themselves automatically up to the setup by you limit and divide themselves into all the professions, so city and palace guards, peasants, tax collectors, caravans and the likes, and they run your day-to-day kingdom operations autonomously, it's the heroes that can claim new land, fulfill the bounties and grab treasure chests. Majesty's gameplay is unique, surprisingly fun and unexpectedly addicting. If you're on the lookout for a game that's unlike any other and also a lot of fun, it's definitely one to try out. Especially that its 18 mission strong campaign following a linear story teaches you all the concepts gradually and never leaves you feeling lost or confused. It's amazing, check it out. I love Star Trek. I love the idea of the United Earth, and even more so of the united in the same goal planets and worlds. Goal of scientific exploration, discovery and learning from one another. It's what I hope for humanity and for all of us. It's also what will most likely never happen as the current real-life geopolitical situation sadly proves best. We're bound for conflict because we're stupid. I mean, you're not, my dear viewer, but the rest of us, well, we're not the sharpest tool. We're no tool at all. We're as thick as the workbench all of the tools are used on. But whatever, I can dream of peace and unity, same way I dream of winning the lottery, and it too is highly unlikely. Probably even more so, but not impossible. If I was given a choice of picking one of the two and having it come true, genie in a lamp type of a scenario, I wonder what I would have picked. Would it be personal wealth, stability and security, or well-being of all mankind? I'd like to believe that it's the latter, but honestly, I'm not sure. Anyway, I have very mixed feelings about Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, because on one hand, it's an excellent and beautiful game that realistically recreates a lot that we've seen in the show, and on another, it's an FPS chock full of action and shootouts, which are not what the TV series are all about at all. In fact, violence is the tool of last resort in the civilized world of Star Trek, and most often than not used as a means of defense rather than in an aggressive manner. You play as Ensign Alex Munro, one of the few best, smartest and handsomest recruits assigned to Voyager's newly formed Elite Force Hazard team of security personnel. Team created in response to Voyager being suddenly and unexpectedly, and in unexplained circumstances, transported into a graveyard of ships surrounding a singular unknown space station. Your main task, other than being armed to the teeth in phasers and scary frowns, is to figure out what or who stands behind the ship's transportation and how to escape the uncomfortable situation. And while it initially is suggested that the infamous Borg may be behind it, the plot that will unveil along the way may surprise you more than once. You'll spend most of the game in an FPS setting on various different ships and space stations along with up to 3 of your AI-controlled teammates, getting to the heart of the mystery, one phaser stunned body at a time. I originally wanted to say one corpse at the time, because first-person shooter and all, but because of it being Star Trek, I prefer thinking that most enemies are just stunned. Painfully, and with a lesson of not messing up with the Order Voyager, but only stunned nonetheless. The weapons are a selection of these found in the series and some I've not seen before. It doesn't mean that they haven't appeared on the show, only that my memory sucks, which is nothing new to me really. Anyway, the enemies are considerably varied and can be anything from generic scavengers and other space roughnecks through series staple Klingons and Borg, or even Federation members from the Mirror universe among others. The one where Federation is completely evil and corrupted. Elite Force is designed to feel like series of episodes of the Voyager rather than levels in a regular shooter, with beginning, middle and end to all of their storylines. And while I appreciate the nod towards the fans of the series' episodic content, it's all a bit too action-packed for me to feel true to its roots. Other than that, it's an excellent shooter, easily one of the best for the year and accompanied by a fantastic plot and stellar presentation. Whether you're a fan of the TV series or not, you should definitely check out Voyager Elite Force, as it's a lot of fun. In fact, it's probably more fun for those who care very little about Star Trek, as they won't notice the philosophical conflict between Star Trek's ideals and the gameplay. Evil Island's Curse of the Lost Soul is a Russian third-person perspective action role-playing. And for a game hardly anyone heard of, as it managed to release under most of our radars, so to speak, it's surprisingly fun and complex. It places you in the shoes of Zack, a boy, or a young man I should say really, who wakes up in an unknown to him location in the middle of ancient and rundown ruins of some old building, not knowing who he is and why he's there at all. In fact, he's no clue where he is either, so it's a mystery of the trifecta kind. What's more interesting even are all the locals who seem to be poor, oppressed and barely surviving, and yet considering completely unknown and alien to them Zack, so you to be their savior. I mean, I know you, so I know you're capable of being one. You saved countless universes, so what's another small world to you? But it's hella disrespectful never even asking for your help and just straight up assuming that you're the one, like Neo in The Matrix, only with better haircut and youthful looks, and that you will save them. We may delve into different what-if scenarios here endlessly, but we all know that in the end you will actually save them all, because you just can't ignore the weak and suffering. But as all true heroes, you're not going to be tackling this huge-ass adventure alone, and will have your trustworthy sidekicks that you'll meet along the way and enroll in your merry team of braves. While there can be 3 active characters in the team at most at any given moment, they can be swapped out, as those that you decided not to add to your current roster don't disappear and just wait patiently to be given a chance to shine. Both you and your companions earn XP, but unlike most other RPGs, Evil Islands doesn't offer a level progression. In fact, there are no levels in the game at all, you divide the experience points you earn for defeating enemies and completing quests between your skills and abilities. And it's worth pointing out here that the jack-of-all-trades approach is not a good choice here, and the master of none will not fare well in Evil Islands. So it's best to specialize yourself and your party members, picking the main route for each of their progressions: magic, archery, thievery or melee combat. You can obviously dip into others to grab some of those extra useful side skills, but keeping a particular single purpose build in mind for each of the companions will make the game considerably more playable. The enemies are rather varied and can be anything from small bats, frogs, boars, wolves, wizards, orcs and the likes, all the way to huge lizards, cyclopses, cyclops, no idea what the plural of it is really, and even giant dragons. In fact, many of the battles you may encounter throughout the first half of the game may be impossible to beat. Like, literally impossible. But they're not the stopgaps in your adventure to prevent you from exploration, because many of them can be avoided by crawling or sneaking around them or even beaten with stealth attacks. You know, there are very few imaginable conflicts that cannot be de-escalated with a powerful backstab. In the end, when all else fails, you can always try to drown the enemies in series of deadly spells, or even the most powerful one in the game, the save load spell, which, you know, instantly reverts time to just before you failed. I think what I'm trying to say here is save game. Save it often. While you may initially be no match for many of the baddies head-on, surprise attacks even up the battlefield pretty well. The weapons are aplenty and quite different from one another, and you can find them in drops from defeated enemies, purchase in shops, or craft. I mean, armor and accessories can be crafted too, but I just got carried away with all the weapons. The atmosphere of the gameplay is also excellent and accompanied by impressive for the time presentation. Evil Islands is a true standout title that was unfortunately largely ignored and/or forgotten. Don't make the same mistakes most of us did in 2000. If you like RPGs, give it a chance, it's worth it. Star Trek Starfleet Command Volume 2 Empires at War is the longest titled game in this entire video. Heck, perhaps the entire year, and also a follow-up to the earlier first Starfleet Command. So a Star Trek space combat simulator. The campaign allows you to pick one of many sides of the imaginary conflict, so Klingons, Romulans, Gorns, Myrak, Lyrans, ISC, Orion Syndicate, Hydrans, and of course Federation. And the missions for each of these will be largely the same, with some cosmetic differences. And I say imaginary because some of the scenarios assume conflict between the races that had been in peace for a very long while in the Star Trek lore. Anyway, while the campaign composed out of story and side missions is largely similar, the ships, weapons and tech between all of them isn't. And each race has their own specific ships, armament and tactics. So as you can see, the potential for interesting encounters is definitely present in the game, and also its strongest point. What you won't find in Starfleet Command 2 is personal drama, hollow room stories, away missions or interesting technical or scientific problems to solve, none of that. The game is about combat and combat alone. which is fine for the most part, but once again, it's totally not what the Star Trek is all about. Sure, there are battles in it, some even gigantic, involving dozens if not hundreds of ships, but at its heart, it's a TV series about exploration, understanding and bettering oneself. Well, whatever. How's the combat, since there's nothing else here really? It's good. Very good, actually. In fact, it defends the entire game from being judged as not really Star Trek because of how Star Trek it makes it feel. I know, I'm kinda contradicting myself here, but you gotta play it to understand it. It ignores the spirit of Star Trek while retaining all of its mechanics. Anyway, there's a lot to keep an eye on during battles, from how many missiles and slasher proton torpedoes you have left, through how well your shield is holding, and you gotta manage it all in real time, during combat, feeling like a true starship captain. So it's not rare that you'll be maneuvering your ship in a way to get hit, yes, get hit, and not to avoid it, in the site where your shields are the strongest, so that you could then lay the destruction to that enemy with a barrage of your own phaser blasts and missiles. Some battles are lost from the start, so if you feel that you can't take a particular enemy and see no tactical way of doing so, and also it's not a story mission, then perhaps it's best not to take part in it at all. Anyway, you can control up to 3 ships of varying size and weaponry at the same time, well, if you have them, that is. You can attack enemy ship-specific components, provided their shields are down, and you can even try to board and capture these ships. There's a lot to do and consider in Starfleet Command 2, and as a captain, it all falls down to you. So, this balancing act of keeping the shield strong, weapons loaded and firing, and even shuttles disrupting or attacking the enemy forces to give you a few seconds of a breather to regroup and jump back into combat is what you'll be doing. And it's hella fun. But what it also is overcomplicated. While the interfaces for all the races are rather clean and easy to grasp, the sheer number of things you must keep in mind and interact with at all times, especially when fighting bigger, stronger or more numerous enemies, can give you a headache. And not of the good kind. A little bit of automation, some kind of an AI assistant that could be given some tasks while you focus on the grand tactics could be of huge help and make this good game great. It's not the case though. So while Starfleet Command is fantastic, it's only that to those who are willing to invest time and energy into learning, memorizing and mastering this beast of a game. And sadly, I believe that most aren't. Starwise Interstellar Consortium have arrived in the known universe and are hoping to pacify other races with their sheer power. You playing as your chosen one have to stand against them. It's perhaps not the deepest of plots, but it's plenty enough to serve as a background to a combat-centric title. Especially one that serves tons upon tons of different ships for you to acquire, arm and use throughout its campaign. If you're a fan of Star Trek and tactical combat simulators, this one's a must-play. In any other case, approach it at your own discretion. Talking about space combat, Tachyon the Fringe is a first-person perspective space combat game, but we'll get to that in a minute. You're Jake Logan, and no, not of the infamous YouTube Logans, and you're a master spaceship pilot. You're so good in fact that you may be one of the few best pilots in the entire galaxy. I mean, there's you, but that's a given, then there's Han Solo from the Star Wars, and maybe, just maybe, Tom Paris from the Voyager, the 3 best of the best. Anyway, you work for the advanced Ganymede Technologies and fly their ships for the ungodly amounts of money, like more per one flight than some others earn in a year or two. You've so much money in fact that you have apartments on most local space stations, and most of them in the good parts of those stations. But for us to have a game, something had to change in this idle life of yours. And in this particular case, on one of the basic missions you were on, something went wrong and a huge-ass explosion killed several civilians. Somehow you've been involved and blamed for it, so now as the game starts, in the fringes outside of the main Sol system, you survive as an exile, working for anyone willing to pay you. In the land, in the space sectors no less, governed by no laws and constantly contended by rivaling megacorporations. And this is where the game starts. Tachyon the Fringe is composed out of over 60 individual handcrafted and scripted missions, making it one of the best playing flight combat simulations ever made. And yes, I did not use the word space here for a reason. I think it's one of the best in the entire genre and not only limited to the stellar kind. Each of the missions have their own unique objectives and background and delivers a unique experience. Some of them will push your personal story of figuring out who framed you forward, while others will serve as an interesting side activities for credits and ranks that then can be used to get better ships and equipment. All of them, however, have a purpose and are not a generic go and kill X number of enemies or escort Y or whatever. In fact, other than not being able to free flight in the space outside of the missions, I'd say that Tachyon is the best Frontier contender ever since the OG Frontier and until Freelancer. It's naturally smaller in scope than these two and has a true story to follow unlike Frontier, but it's just fantastic the way it is. Taken's presentation is pretty good too, not lacking in detail or atmospheric sounds, but it's nowhere near the best in the genre. It's clear that the focus was placed on gameplay and design, and that's where it shines, serving as a beacon of amazing in the vast empty vacuum of space full of mediocre games. Make sure to check it out. Have you ever wondered about Genesis and true meaning of Kaplar, or how the blood wine really tastes like? Or how Klingons, while moving as if they were standing in a mat with their hands tied, are considered some of the fiercest and most dangerous warriors in the galaxy? Well, wonder no more. Star Trek Klingon Academy answers those and many more other questions too. Only not really, but it felt like a good jump-off point. Klingon Academy is a successor to earlier Starfleet Academy and places you in the shoes of a glory-hungry, young Klingon officer, Torlek, studying in the Klingon Command Academy to become the best of the Empire's ship captains. The game is set 2 years before the truce between the Federation and Klingon Empire, and you're studying directly under famous General Chang, known for his numerous conquers and his mouth-watering beef stir-fry. He will send you on a simulated campaign against the Federation, focusing on final decisive assault on them. Klingons are honorable fighters, honorable to fault at that, as they can't ever see past that blinding honor, to focus on logic, and that's pretty well telegraphed in the game too. Because simulation or not, if you fail a mission, you're dismissed from the Academy. What's more, you're relegated to be the Academy's toilet cleaner, and not just a regular toilet cleaner, mind you, but one for the teachers. And you can only imagine how much blood wine they drink throughout the day. It's not fun. There are tons of missions you'll get to partake in following this training campaign, and along them you'll get to see and often battle over 40 different ships belonging to various Star Trek species. What's more, if you're lucky, you'll get to destroy the series staple, USS Enterprise, which is just all kinds of confusing to me. I mean, destroying the flagship is hell of an achievement, no doubt about that, but on the other hand, no one wants to see it happen. Well, other than the Klingons before the truce, Romulans on any odd day of the week, and Borg. But only because it's not in one of the most fun shapes of round or square. You can visit different parts of the ships you'll control too, so sickbase, engineering, comms and the likes, and can even board the enemy vessels if their shields are down. It's all really fun if you're into Star Trek. Graphics and sounds are nice, though nothing to write home about really, but they are all in lore, so you'll appreciate them nonetheless. And the extra 90-ish minutes of video footage with actors from the series will serve as an extra cherry on this already sweet pie of a game. I wouldn't say that Klingon Academy will teach you how to be a real Klingon, for that you'd need to be truly effed in the head, but it will no doubt show you Star Trek space from the twisted, honor-based perspective. If you're a fan of the series, chances are you'll love it, and if you're not, check it out anyway, as it may be weird enough for you to enjoy. Paradox are well known for their obscenely deep, demanding and complicated strategies, and 2000's Europa Universalis, a precursor to the entire series, and also Hearts of Iron and Crusader Kings, is not an exception. I mean, they've released other games too, but these are the three I think of when I imagine very complex and rewarding global strategies that are more thorough in their approach to details than basically anything else on the market. They're known for being some of the most difficult and demanding games to get into, with an incredibly high entry point requiring you to focus on dozens of things at once and think in multitasking manner. But in the same time, if you manage to do so, if you cross that sky-high threshold, they're some of the best gaming experiences one can ever have. Mind you, being mainly a strategy and role-playing gamer myself, I still find all of this ungodly demanding. Especially that I'm a free mind and it's not easy for me to focus on one thing, let alone a number of them at the same time, and then keep all of them in mind and how they now and in the future will correlate and influence one another. It may seem like I'm talking just for the sake of talking here, but if you ever played any of these, you know exactly what I mean by all that blabber. Anyway, Europa Universalis lets you control one of a variety of European powers during the age of colonization and conquest, and you'll have all the tools in the world at your disposal for your chosen nation to come on top. So you can engage in deep diplomacy full of alliances, deals, bribes, backstabbings and betrayals. You can partake in small skirmishes as well as in massive world-spanning multi-front wars, which funny enough, if you're good enough of a player, you could have started yourself for one reason or another. You can discover, explore and colonize new lands, and generally speaking play the best grand strategy of 2000. Yes, not one of, but the best. What's more, each of the countries that you can play as are not just reskins of one another, but all work entirely different and have their own beliefs, customs and values. All of the decisions that you'll make, be it military, diplomatic and financial, will not only influence your country and your closest competitors, but can change the history of the game's entire world. And hardly any title up to that point in history of gaming was as overflowing with detail and possibilities. Especially that the start-off point in terms of land division, military strength and diplomatic relations between all 8 major nations is a nearly one-to-one carbon copy of what it really was in 1492 in our history. and you get to rewrite it as you see fit. Or as you manage to, cause the entry point and learning curve of this one is atrocious to say the least. Europa Universalis is at the same time a micromanagement heaven as it is a micromanagement hell. There's so much stuff to do, check, modify, plan, strategize and follow. It's easy to get lost, and it's also so overwhelming that many potential gamers may just bounce off of it, even if they play strategies exclusively. It's a game like no other, in terms of everything, good or bad. Check it out, but make sure to be mentally prepared as it may break you. Star Trek Deep Space Nine The Fallen is one of the most Star Trek feeling Star Trek games to date. I know what you're thinking, grammar gods have abandoned me, but it was the best way I could explain myself here. Well, the best way I know of. Point is that many Star Trek games use the setting and stories but don't feel Star Trek, by either contradicting its guiding principles or straying from the lore it is based on. This one's not like that at all. It takes place roughly around the end of the 6th season of the TV series and requires you to have at the very least basic knowledge of it, or preferably a deeper understanding of the religious and political situation of it all. You play as Sisko, Kira and Worf and clearly represent the Federation in the story. Story that will have you discover the mysteries and true power of the three missing red orbs of Jalbador, chasing them through space and time. For all intents and purposes, The Fallen is a third-person action adventure, not unlike more famous Tomb Raider, and also focusing on puzzling, exploration and in parts combat too. The Unreal Engine used to power it all makes The Fallen look fantastic for the time it released in and recreate many of the series' staple locations in unprecedented detail. I mean, even the titular Deep Space Nine station is included, and that one's not an easy thing to replicate. The levels are huge, open, offering a lot of verticality and full of interesting unique locations and puzzles. So you'll not only visit the aforementioned space station, but also Planet Bajor, the Defiant, Dominion Prison, Underground Temple, Sunken Starship, among others. Many of the puzzles are solved with an always helpful tricoder, an iconic scientific Star Trek tool. Most missions have you seek out particular objects and then deliver them to specific locations where they are used, or to certain characters. The story enveloping it all is excellent and very TV feeling for the lack of a better word, and also a blast to follow. Well, short of some annoying backtracking sections which sadly happen more than once throughout it. The Fallen is probably the most Star Trek-like game from this entire video, as it focuses mostly on, let's say, away missions part of the series and a lot of exploration and puzzling, with combat taking a definite backseat. If you're into the series at all, this one's a no-brainer and should be the first game from this video that you'll try out. Happyland Adventures is a cutesy fantasy side-scrolling platformer in which you play as a small dog that has to gather and save all the lost colorful animals and then lead them to the so-called happy zones. Animal haven gateways perhaps, or the farm that so many of us were told about when our pets passed away. Neither, I think, as the animals seem to be in a tip-top shape when they get there, so maybe a kennel, whatever. Once you manage to save enough of them and deliver to those happy zones, you're free to move to the next stage. Not many people know this, but this little gem of a game was created as a freeware entry for the GameDevNet contest, and then easily won it. Unsurprisingly so, as behind the over-the-top sweet graphics lies a hell of a game, something that many would willingly pay for given its quality. There are obviously numerous pickups other than the animals that supplement your score and enable extra abilities for our little dog, and what feels like hundreds of hidden locations full of gems and fruit to gather. The final version of the game included earlier standalone Xmas expansion and the level editor, addition of which spawned numerous user-created levels that extended the life of this amazing platformer considerably. My first experience with Happyland Adventures was when I was at uni studying to become IT technician/teacher, believe it or not, and I had to spend some time teaching IT in primary and secondary schools to gain extra credit and necessary experience. And I happened to end up in the school that my youngest sister was a student of. Well, I aimed to get there. Chances were slim, but stars aligned correctly, no war started that year, which may be a surprise to everyone these days, and I landed where I was supposed to. And everyone in her class played Happyland every second they got free as if they were possessed by it. At first I disregarded it as a game for kids. After all, it was not played from the first-person perspective, there were no guns and no cities or nations to manage within it whatsoever, so it was definitely not a title for me. Or so I thought. But then I gave it a go one of those days and I was instantly hooked. It's easily one of the best late classic PC platformers, and one you should do yourself a favor and try out. And no, I'm not a teacher anymore. Star Trek Armada is my personal least favorite Star Trek game from this entire video. And no, not because it's bad or the worst of them all, not the case here whatsoever. It's an RTS, so a genre I dabble in very little and only from time to time. So, if you're a fan of all things real-time and strategic, carry on watching, you may actually love it. Armada is set in the late 24th century, sometime after the Dominion War. The game setting sees Klingons involved in heavy infighting for power, Romulan covert intelligence agency Tal Shiar discovering a very dangerous secret, potentially capable of tipping the balance of power in the universe, and Captain Jean-Luc Picard meeting with the time-traveling Federation ship and being warned of an imminent Borg invasion. I know, a lot happening all at once, but that's what Star Trek is all about. The game is composed out of 4 mainline campaigns, one for each side of Federation, Klingon, Romulan and Borg, and a hidden smaller, 5th epilogue campaign. Each of the species plays entirely different, has their own kinds of ships and armament, and even unique super powerful weapons. Their distinctive features have also been translated into video game format successfully, so Federation is the most rounded up race with good defensive and offensive capabilities, Klingons are very strong attackers but lack a bit in defense, Romulans have cloaks on most ships, and Borg, well, the resistance is futile, you will be assimilated. It has a nice ring to it. Some of the current world tyrants should use it as a slogan really. Anyway, most ships have 2 HP bars, and when the shields are down, you can transport units to the enemy ships to battle their crew inside, and if successful, take over those ships, which you know is very lore appropriate. Number of crew members on the ships also dictate how fast they shoot and their self-repair rate. If any of the ships or stations have their entire crew killed and/or removed and are unmanned, they are considered derelict and are uncontrollable until crewed again or destroyed. Each unit, so a ship or station, has 5 systems: shield generator, engines, life support, sensors and weapons, and these can be damaged in combat too and take time to repair. Other Star Trek factions are present throughout the campaigns too, but only play minor roles in them, so you may end up seeing an odd Ferengi here and there, which you know is always fun, rules of acquisition and all. Famous from the TV series characters and ships will play their role in gameplay too, often key roles no less, and they're usually much stronger and better performing than your base set. While space can be considered a big bucket of empty, Star Trek taught us over its numerous different series and movies that it's not the case whatsoever, so all kinds of nebulas, wormholes, asteroid fields or black holes will be present and even take active part in your combat strategies. Well, active as in you'll use them to your advantage and not as autonomous units. All in all, if not for the RTS part of it, I would have loved Armada. It's a well-rounded, unique and fun game in the universe of Star Trek, and one that gives its strategic combat side justice. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is a third-person action-adventure in the ultra-popular and called by today's series, spanning numerous mainline entry games, spin-offs, movies and even TV series. Also, a whole world of toys and subjects for the cosplayers to cover. Nemesis takes place during the events of Resident Evil 2 and sees you playing as a series, style and beauty icon, Miss Jill Valentine. So you'll need to help Jill escape overrun by the undead town of Raccoon City. T-Virus zombies, however, are the least of Jill's problems, as the teacher Nemesis is on her track and will stop at nothing to get her. Nemesis saw an ultra-powerful and nigh-indestructible bioweapon. Umbrella Corporation sure knew where to invest their money in research, you gotta admit that. And the best thing about it is that they never stopped. I mean, we have by now like, what, 200, 300 Resident Evil games, and we still battle the Umbrella or the corrupted mutants. Same as in earlier entries in the series, all the graphics are made out of pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D real-time rendered objects and characters overlaid on them. I've been very vocal about it in the past, but I will gladly repeat myself here. I hate this kind of a solution in my video games as it makes them look terrible in my opinion, and also more often than not, especially at certain angles, camera or controls leave a lot to be desired. Fortunately, it's not the worst here, and it's just the aesthetics that annoy me a little about it. I'm in the vocal minority though, so it may be something you won't even notice while playing. Unlike previous entries, however, Jill can now instantly spin by 180 degrees, dodge to avoid attacks and create different kinds of ammunition, each working better against a particular kind of an enemy. Location of some key items is randomized too, which adds a lot to the replayability of Resident Evil 3. And while I won't be replaying it anytime soon myself, I know that for many of you it's a cult classic and a game worth many playthroughs. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.